Chapter 169. The rooster was dead. Suddenly, the Empress, who had been sobbing quietly, screamed in panic, "Dead! Dead! Poison! The Buddha statue is poisonous! Muhu! Muhu! Don't be like this! What happened to you?" Long Tianmo hurriedly hugged the Empress, but the Empress kept struggling in fear. "Let go of me, the rooster is dead, do you see? The rooster is dead. Changping is also dead. Poison, that thing is poisonous." As the Empress screamed, she suddenly quieted down and stared blankly at Long Tianmo. "Moa, I was the one who caused Changping's death, right? Was it me? Moa, I didn't do it on purpose, I really didn't do it on purpose. It wasn't me, it wasn't me." Long Fei Yi stared blankly at his mother's frightened appearance, his mind completely blank. Could it be that Muhu went crazy? Just as Long Tianmo was in a daze, the Empress suddenly broke free from his hands and ran out of the West Wing. "Someone come, stop the Empress. Call an imperial physician, quickly," the Empress Dowager cried out in alarm. She had seen too many crazy women in the harem in her life. The Empress's appearance made her afraid. Long Tianmo finally recovered and was the first to chase after her. "Qian Mima, what exactly happened?" Long Fei Yi sternly asked. The source of the poison had been found, but the matter wasn't over yet. Who would believe that the Empress would poison Princess Changping? There must be a reason for the Empress to be so crazy. Qian Mema trembled in fear and didn't dare to hide anything. Not long after Princess Changping's death, Xiaoye also died in the West Wing. She suddenly collapsed in that room, and her death was very similar to Princess Changping's. There was no reason for it, and there was no pain or illness. When the Empress found out, she ordered this servant to secretly bury Xiaoye. That day, the Empress stayed in this room for a long time. When she came out, she ordered this servant to bury the wooden Buddha statue. At that time, the Buddha statue was tightly wrapped and this servant didn't know what it was, so I could only do as I was told. When I heard that something was missing in this room, this servant knew it must be the thing from that day. Qian Mema paused for a moment, then added, "Your Highness, the Empress definitely isn't the culprit. This Buddha statue was just sent from Nanzhao last year. The person who presented it said that the material was special and very rare. It's called something arrow wood." At that time, this servant was also present. The Empress really didn't know that this thing was poisonous. Her Majesty must be blaming herself too much to hide this matter. Hearing this, Han Yunxi finally understood what was going on. That night, at the scene of Princess Changping's death, she had explained the matter of the poison arrow wood in detail. Later on, the Empress had probably guessed the cause of Xiaoye's death, which was why she had concealed Xiaoye's death and buried the Buddha statue. However, was the Empress blaming herself, unwilling to accept the result, or was she deliberately using this opportunity to frame her? Thinking of the Empress's mental state, Han Yunxi didn't want to pursue the matter. She turned and bowed towards the Empress Dowager, saying lightly, "Empress Dowager, there are 2 wounds on Changping's right hand. There's poison on the wounds, the same as the one on the Buddha statue. It's the poison arrow wood. If the Empress Dowager doesn't believe me, you can ask other poison doctors to examine it. Chunqie is innocent. It was a coincidence. The Empress probably didn't want it to be like this." Now that the truth was out, what else could the Empress Dowager say? She seemed to have aged 10 years in a single night. Her usually astute eyes were now bloodshot and muddy. She never thought that Changping would die like this. In order to give her a surprise for the new year, for a Buddha statue, she lost her life. After a long time, the Empress Dowager murmured, "Han Yunxi, why didn't you go earlier? Why didn't you save Changping?" This was what the Empress had just questioned Han Yunxi. She didn't have time to save the princess, so she was the culprit. The Empress couldn't accept that the Buddha statue was the source of the poison. She couldn't accept that Changping's death was related to her own negligence. She was also afraid that the truth would be revealed, so she kept pointing fingers at her and even wanted her to confess. She was just deceiving herself. Han Yunxi exhaled, saying lightly, "Empress Dowager, doctors aren't omnipotent. Please restrain your grief." As a doctor, Han Yunxi blamed herself for not being able to save a life in time. She felt regret. However, This kind of thing happened too often. This didn't mean she had to take responsibility. She only rejoiced that she had the chance to explain herself. Otherwise, she would have died even more unjustly than Princess Changping. The Empress Dowager's brows furrowed as she stared at Han Yunshi. The surroundings were silent. But right at this moment, a eunuch suddenly flew in. Empress Dowager, the Empress, she has gone mad. The Empress Dowager was stunned. She only felt her vision darken before she fainted. Fortunately, an old mema by her side caught her in time and brought her into the room. Gone mad. Han Yunshi's eyes flashed with pity as her heart grew heavy. All right, no matter what the Empress thought, she was willing to believe that the Empress had lost her mind to frame her like this. She didn't want to pursue the Empress's false accusations anymore. If she thought like this, she could be forgiven. If she thought like this, the world would be much brighter. Han Yunshi inadvertently turned her head and saw Long Fei staring at her. What are you looking at? She blurted out. Long Fei gave a start and coughed lightly. He looked up at the sky, which was already dark. He said mildly, the time is just right. You can go back now. Oh, Han Yunshi nodded. She didn't know what the Empress's situation was, much less what Emperor Tianhui's reaction would be if he found out. In any case, since this fellow said he wanted her to leave, then so be it. She assumed that Long Fei wanted her to go back on her own, but he actually left with her. He left without even saying goodbye. Long Fei, Long Fei, are you sure you haven't offended Emperor Tianhui enough? No matter what the Empress and Empress Dowager's reactions were, at least Han Yunshi knew that Emperor Tianhui wanted to kill her after Madame Li's death. It looked like she'd better be careful in the future and not leave behind any weak points. After climbing into the carriage, Han Yunshi felt exhausted as soon as she sat down. She'd been locked up for 5 days and 5 nights without food or sleep. Now that she'd been tossed and turned, her taut nerves finally relaxed. She was truly about to collapse. She wanted to take a nap, but somehow, she couldn't fall asleep when she was next to a certain block of ice. She leaned lazily on one side and hesitated for a long time before she said, this time many thanks. Normally, she would call him Your Highness. When she was angry, she'd impulsively call him Long Fei. But when she spoke seriously, she didn't call him that at all. Long Fei sat languidly in his seat, his noble and domineering air a natural part of him. He looked at her coldly and tossed out, don't cause trouble for your lordship in the future. Trouble? Trouble came knocking on my door, all right? Han Yunshi muttered resentfully. Long Fei's eyes flashed with amusement before he asked coldly, what did you say? I don't need to return the command medallion, do I? Han Yunshi purposely joked. Actually, what really shocked her wasn't the truth, but the matter of the command medallion. This fellow had invested so much in her, so he couldn't have any frightening motives, right? But Long Fei's expression stiffened. He didn't reply, but turned to look out the window. What an unpredictable guy, Han Yunshi muttered to herself as she looked in the other direction. By the time Long Fei and Han Yunshi returned to the Duke of Qin's estate, Grand Concubine Yi had long heard the news from the palace. It had to be said that news traveled fast. Han Yunshi had escaped death from the hands of the Empress Dowager and Empress. She thought that Grand Concubine Yi would rejoice and welcome her back, but as soon as she and Long Fei stepped through the doors, Grand Concubine Yi didn't even spare her a glance. Instead, she grabbed Long Fei and demanded, Fei, you used the command medallion? Yes, Long Fei replied mildly before continuing to walk forward. You used the command medallion just for her sake. Grand Concubine Yi couldn't believe it. Han Yunshi's sparkling eyes dimmed as she resentfully lowered her head, a bitter smile rising to her lips. But Long Fei only replied, your lordship's things, so your lordship is happy to use them. You. Grand Concubine Yi fumed, but had no words to retort. Han Yunshi stole a glance at Long Fei and saw his cold but serious profile. In an instant, her drooping lips rose into a sweet smile. Long Fei, I, Han Yunshi, will remember your willingness. Seeing Long Fei leave, Grand Concubine Yi chased after him. She didn't mention the command medallion again, but asked, Yarrow Yarrow went back to Western Jew this morning. Did you know about this? Hearing this, Han Yunshi recalled the events of the New Year's Eve banquet. Emperor Tianhui had called Long Feiyi over for a private talk. What had they talked about? Princess Rongla wasn't the type to admit defeat easily, so why had she gone back? If Princess Rongla went back, did that mean the marriage alliance after the new year had fallen through? Thinking up to here, Han Yunshi's smile grew even more intense. I don't know, Long Feiyi replied mildly without stopping his steps. Grand concubine Yi followed closely behind, her voice angry. Feiyi. Mu Fei is talking to you. Long Feiyi stopped. Mu Fei, Princess Rongla's marriage alliance has nothing to do with the Duke of Qin's estate. You should worry less in the future. You. Grand concubine Yi fumed. You just what did you say to His Majesty? Did you hurt Yarrow Yarrow? Long Feiyi didn't reply, but strode towards the hibiscus courtyard. Han Yunshi tactfully followed, and husband and wife soon disappeared from Grand concubine Yi's sight. Grand concubine Yi was so angry that her face turned red. But when she calmed down, she knitted her brows and muttered to herself, Feiyi, he couldn't really be doing this for Han Yunshi, could he? Currently, the Empress's Hall of Earthly Tranquility was in chaos. The court ladies and Mama were frantically packing things up. Even Jiyu Beiyu had confirmed that the Empress had gone mad. She needed to be carefully nursed back to health without being provoked again, or else she might never recover. Emperor Tianhui made the decision that very night to send the Empress to a side palace in the Western Mountains to recuperate. She wouldn't even be allowed to attend Princess Changping's funeral. Emperor Tianhui sat in the courtyard, his expression so gloomy that it could drip water. His daughter had died, and the Empress had gone mad. How could he not be angry when a perfectly good New Year's Eve had ended up like this? Moreover, Han Yunshi had been absolved of her crimes. If he hadn't agreed to Long Feiyi's request to release Han Yunshi, perhaps the Empress wouldn't have lost her mind. Moreover, Long Feiyi had insisted on not accepting the marriage alliance, angering Princess Rongla so much that she left without saying goodbye this morning. He was still hoping to cooperate with Western Jew on the northern border after the new year, but now it looked like things were hanging in the balance. Thinking up to this point, Emperor Tianhui clenched his fists and pounded the stone table a few times. At this moment, the Empress Dowager walked over with a heavy expression. Emperor, let's hold the funeral tomorrow so that I won't feel sad. Emperor Tianhui gave a long sigh and nodded. The Empress Dowager sat down with a cold smile. Emperor, as I see it, this Qin Wangfei, she's really something. Emperor Tianhui raised his head. Muhu, don't worry. Ursi Hen knows what to do. Chapter 170. Han Yunshi was in a good mood as she eagerly followed behind Long Feiyi towards the hibiscus courtyard. Long Feiyi was very quiet the entire way as the two of them reached a fork in the garden. To the right was a long corridor that led to the sleeping quarters, while to the left was a small path that led to the leisurely cloud pavilion. Han Yunshi couldn't help but feel that this big ice cube should have said something about the matter with Grand Concubine Yi. She suspected that Long Feiyi and Emperor Tianhui had quarreled fiercely over the marriage alliance, so Emperor Tianhui wouldn't let go of her imprisonment until Long Feiyi had no choice but to take out his command token. Otherwise, even if Emperor Tianhui wanted to kill her, he wouldn't give Long Feiyi no chance without any evidence, right? Han Yunshi slowed down as they approached the fork in the road, but Long Feiyi didn't say a word. He didn't stop his steps, but turned right. All right, she'd thought too much. Seeing Long Feiyi's figure fade into the darkness of the long corridor, Han Yunshi obediently returned to her leisurely cloud pavilion. Finally home. Under Zhao Mama's care and concern, Han Yunshi washed away her exhaustion and ate her fill. As soon as she went upstairs, she saw a locked window. Han Yunshi suddenly laughed foolishly. No one was looking, so what was she feeling awkward about? She coughed lightly a few times, smoothed out her bangs, and smoothed out her long hair. After various small movements, she finally walked over and nimbly unlocked the window. As soon as she did, the night rushed in. Not too far away, the brightly lit palace hall was conspicuous in the darkness, but also mysterious. Han Yunshi lazily sprawled on the windowsill, one hand propping up her head. As she stared and stared, she unconsciously fell into a trance. Long Fei Yi, you used the command token to save me. In the end, why, ah? At this moment, Long Fei Yi was bathing in the hot spring pool in his bedroom. He leaned against the side of the pool, his ink-black hair casually draped over his shoulders. His slender and refined arms were spread out on the shore. His bronze-colored chest muscles were clearly defined, and his figure was so good that it made people want to vomit blood. People couldn't help but imagine the half of his body underwater. He raised his head. Even though his eyes were closed, he still exuded the domineering aura of a king. He seemed to be thinking about something. As for what he was thinking about, no one knew. The next day, Princess Changping's funeral was held. As for the truth behind the princess's death, it wasn't made public. To the outside world, it was only announced that the princess had contracted a terrible disease and died of natural causes. After all, publicizing the truth would be too embarrassing for the royal family, and it wouldn't reflect well on them either. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi attended the funeral together. During the funeral, Han Yunxi clearly felt the Empress Dowager's hostility. Although Han Yunxi wasn't the culprit, she wasn't surprised by the hostility. Even if the Empress Dowager had arranged for her to marry Long Fei Yi, she had no heart of loyalty to the Empress Dowager. Even if nothing had happened, she and the Empress Dowager would have been irreconcilable sooner or later. Emperor Tianhui, on the other hand, didn't reveal much of his emotions aside from his heavy expression and silence. In the end, an emperor was still an emperor. For the next few days, Han Yunxi rested at home. Grand concubine Yi didn't make trouble for her because of Princess Rongla. News of what happened at the family banquet on New Year's Eve didn't spread. Princess Rongla's wedding seemed to have passed just like that. But Han Yunxi soon discovered that she'd been overthinking things. On the 15th day of the Lantern Festival, bad news came from Tianning's northwest borders. Western Ju's emperor had transferred away a third of the troops stationed at the three-way battlefield. Cloud Realm continent had 3 countries, Tianning Country, Western Ju Country, and Northern Li Country. The 3 countries bordered each other. To the north of Tianning was Northern Li, while to the west was Western Ju. To the northwest of Tianning, northeast of Western Ju, and southwest of Northern Li was a battlefield known as the three-way battlefield. The three-way battlefield couldn't be considered large, but it wasn't small either. It was about the size of 3 cities and had no tall mountains, but flatlands and hills. This was the land that the 3 countries had fought over for generations. Even now, the ownership of this land was still in dispute. Because of this, none of the countries could control it. Thus, it became a no-man's land with no sovereign or laws. When there were no wars, all sorts of shady dealings took place there. Fists were the law, and the strong were the kings. All 3 countries had built cities and garrisoned troops at the borders of the three-way battlefield to strictly control all movements at the border. It was to guard against the possibility of war breaking out at any moment. Unfortunately, Tianning Country suffered a great disadvantage because of its terrain. Northern Li's border was the easiest to defend, the Three-Mountain Pass. It was basically impossible to cross the three-way battlefield and attack Northern Li's border. Meanwhile, Western Ju's border was also a mountainous area. Although it wasn't as good as Northern Li's, it wasn't easy to attack either. But Tianning Country's border was completely flat. Of all Tianning Country's borders, it was the most difficult to defend and the weakest. Although generations of Tianning Country's emperors had worked hard to build a flat Great Wall here, the Great Wall of the Southern Route, it was still no match for Northern Li's ferocious army in a real battle. Tianning and Western Ju had formed an alliance through marriage because they'd borrowed Western Ju's military strength to defend against Northern Li's invasion. But now Western Ju's emperor had withdrawn a third of his troops from the three-way battlefield after Princess Rongla's return. What did this mean? This was a threat to eat fruit. Emperor Tianhui viciously tossed out the memorial, causing all of the officials in the imperial study to fall to their knees, including General Mu and Mu Qingwu. Abominable. Truly abominable. Emperor Tianhui's temper flared. His original plans had been well laid out, but as soon as the marriage alliance was settled, He immediately proposed a meeting with Western Jew's emperor to discuss military cooperation on the three-way border. They'd exchange weapons for each other's needs while balancing the two countries' strategies and making long-term plans. But who knew that such bad news would arrive before the new year was over? War was the best way to test a country's overall strength. Over the past decade or so since Emperor Tianhui's ascension, the three countries had been relatively stable. Although there were a few battles, they weren't major ones. Thus, Tianning's treasury had been empty for the past few years and its outdated military equipment hadn't been exposed. What Emperor Tianhui feared most was a major battle. More accurately, he feared that something would happen at the three-way battlefield. Northern Li had been eyeing Tianning country covetously to begin with. They wanted to use the three-way battlefield to break a hole in Tianning's northern defenses. Once Northern Li's emperor heard the news, how could he miss such a golden opportunity? How could he not make a move? In the silence, Mu Qingwu cupped his hands in salute and said, "Your Majesty, Western Jew has gone too far. This soldier is willing to rush to the three-way battlefield immediately and deploy troops and provisions to defend the borders to the death." Mu Qingwu had always had opinions about the three-way battlefield's defensive strategies. If Tianning relied too much on Western Jew, it'd only end up in the hands of others. The most important thing was that its own troops were strong. Still, Mu Qingwu was too young to understand Emperor Tianhui's true concerns. Even an old general like Mu Qingwu might not be able to see through Emperor Tianhui's depth. Emperor Tianhui glanced at Mu Qingwu, impatience flickering in his eyes. A long time later, he dismissed everyone. "Your Majesty, Western Jew's actions are clearly..." Mu Qingwu wanted to admonish him, but Emperor Tianhui cut him off angrily. "Get out." Mu Qingwu still didn't give up, but General Mu only glared at him before dragging him away. "Father, if His Majesty gives in this time, what will happen in the future? Moreover, the Duke of Qin might not agree. If news of this spreads, where will the Duke of Qin hide his face? Where will the dignity of my Tianning country go?" Mu Qingwu was furious. He knew that Western Jew's emperor's actions were aimed at the marriage alliance for the sake of Princess Rongla's personal gain. Did Western Jew's emperor treat the long-term cooperation between the two countries as child's play? Or perhaps Western Jew's emperor had other ideas about the cooperation between the two countries and was simply using this as a pretext to make a fuss? Mu Qingwu had no time to consider all that. That was for the strategists to consider. He only knew that if the emperor gave in this time, he'd be showing weakness to Western Jew. Enough, enough. Great General Mu knitted his brows as he pulled Mu Qingwu away from the imperial study. Only then did he speak. "Qingwu, you have to remember your duties as a subject. And also, don't mention the Duke of Qin in front of His Majesty in the future." Everyone knew that the emperor valued the Duke of Qin and was even more on guard against him. The general's estate held military power and couldn't afford to get too close to the Duke of Qin. "Father, why are you even?" Before Mu Qingwu could finish speaking, he suddenly stopped. He saw His Highness Duke of Qin walking towards the imperial study from the side. Mu Qingwu was about to follow when General Mu said, "His Majesty has long made up his mind. It's useless to persuade him otherwise. Go back." So speaking, he dragged Mu Qingwu away. Long Feiyi glanced at the Mu father and son who were tugging at each other. He had a clear idea of what was going on and walked expressionlessly into the imperial study. Inside the study, the memorials from the border regions were still lying on the floor. Emperor Tianhui was staring at the map on the wall with his hands clasped behind his back, his fingers intertwined. Long Feiyi picked up the memorial and glanced at it before tossing it onto the table. Imperial brother summoned Chundi so urgently. "What's the matter?" "Take a look at that memorial," Emperor Tianhui said coldly. "I've seen it," Long Feiyi replied immediately. "What do you think?" Emperor Tianhui asked. Imperial brother should find General Mu and the Ministry of War to discuss important military matters. Chundi doesn't understand these things. Long Feiyi was still very calm. But Emperor Tianhui suddenly laughed. "That's true. How could Jin have forgotten? The Duke of Qin never participates in military matters. If there's nothing else, Chundi will take his leave first." Long Feiyi dared to say such things. But Emperor Tianhui only said, "Eunuch Shui, announce the imperial edict." Announce the imperial edict? That was a familiar phrase. Half a year ago, Emperor Tianhui had also told Eunuch Shui to announce the imperial edict and choose a wedding date for him to marry Han Yunxi. Today, history was repeating itself. Eunuch Shui timidly walked out and read out the imperial edict. This time, Emperor Tianhui wanted Long Feiyi to marry Western Ju's Princess Rongla. Not only did he want Long Feiyi to marry her, but he also wanted Long Feiyi to personally lead the marriage procession to Western Ju to ask for her hand in marriage. Imperial orders couldn't be disobeyed, much less disobeyed. In the end, he was still a monarch and a subject. Disobeying an imperial edict was a heinous crime. By the time Eunuch Shui finished reading, Emperor Tianhui slowly turned around to look at the kneeling Long Feiyi. His lips rose into a mocking smile. "Long Feiyi, since you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, don't blame Zhen for being merciless. You didn't have a choice when you married Han Yunxi, so you won't have a choice this time either." Duke of Qin, still not accepting the edict? Emperor Tianhui asked with amusement. But Long Feiyi actually stood up and said cold, "Imperial brother, Chundi can't do it. If marrying Han Yunxi was a form of compromise, then he'd only do it once in his life." Words for the readers. I'm so moved to see everyone's understanding. Thank you all. The Duke of Qin and Yunxi won't disappoint anyone. Chapter 171. Emperor Tianhui stared at Long Feiyi, who was standing stiffly in front of him. He was more shocked than angry. Can't do it. He dared to say he couldn't. Long Feiyi had already told him multiple times that he couldn't do it, but this time was different. This time, he was facing an imperial edict. Emperor Tianhui backed up a step and asked in disbelief, "Long Feiyi, are you going to defy the edict?" But Long Feiyi only said mildly, "Chundi has already defied the edict." His tone was light, but it emanated a domineering air that made it impossible for anyone to ignore him. Even though he'd rejected Emperor Tianhui, he was still lofty and untouchable. Emperor Tianhui gave a start, as if he'd been intimidated by Long Feiyi's aura. No, he was the emperor. His authority wasn't to be challenged. Emperor Tianhui swept a table full of memorials to the ground as he narrowed his eyes at Long Feiyi. Killing intent rose from his body as he glared at him. After a moment, he ordered without hesitation, "The Duke of Qin defied the edict. Take him to the Hall of Regrets and confine him there. Without Zhen's permission, no one is allowed to visit him." As soon as he finished speaking, guards entered the room to detain Long Feiyi. Emperor Tianhui looked at him cold, expecting him to regret his actions and beg for mercy. But Long Feiyi didn't resist. Instead, his lips rose into a cold, contemptuous smile as he was led away by the guards. It wasn't until the mountain-like figure vanished from the doorway that Emperor Tianhui fell back into his chair, as if waking up from a nightmare. He calmed himself down and glared angrily at the frightened Eunuch Shui. He actually dared to defy the edict. Is he planning to rebel? Does he really think Zhen won't dare to deal with him? This time, Zhen's going to deal with him. Eunuch Shui, you go. You go. Stand guard personally for Zhen. No one is allowed to take half a step into the Hall of Regrets. Tell him that if he doesn't marry Princess Rongla, he can forget about leaving for the rest of his life. Eunuch Shui was scared to death, his heart pounding in his chest. He'd served 2 generations of sovereigns, but this was the first time he'd seen someone openly defy an imperial decree in front of the emperor. His mind was a blank, so he didn't even hear what Emperor Tianhui had said. "What are you waiting for?" Emperor Tianhui roared angrily as he swept everything left on the table to the ground. He was so angry that his nostrils were about to fume. Only then did Eunuch Shui come back to his senses. Not daring to tarry, he scrambled out. That day, the news that the Duke of Qin had defied the imperial edict and was placed under house arrest at Regret Palace spread out, shocking the entire court. After all, the Duke of Qin's power was enough to overturn the court and the common people. Even Emperor Tianhui feared him and wouldn't touch him lightly. But once he did, it would mean that Emperor Tianhui was serious. The situation was very serious. Grand concubine Yi was the first to receive the news. She'd lost her meal halfway through and rushed to the palace, but not only was she unable to enter Regret Palace to see Long Fei Yi, she was refused entry to the imperial study as well. Although the details of the Duke of Qin's rebellion hadn't been made public, Princess Rongla's early return and the movements at the three-way battlefield made it clear to everyone that it had something to do with the political marriage alliance. In a flash, there were all sorts of opinions and rumors, with the most popular being that Qin Wangfei had bewitched the Duke of Qin to stop the marriage alliance. Grand concubine Yi waited outside the imperial study for an entire day until Emperor Tianhui came out in the evening. Your Majesty, the Duke of Qin was muddle-headed for a moment. Let me go in and coax him. Emperor Tianhui didn't even spare her a glance as he prepared to leave. Grand concubine Yi hastened to chase after him, but a eunuch stopped her from getting any closer. Your Majesty, you know Fei's personality as well. He's been stubborn since he was young. Just let me coax him, he'll definitely change his mind. Your Majesty, the situation at the borders is changing every day. If you, Grand concubine Yi, Emperor Tianhui cut her off angrily. Grand concubine Yi, is the Duke of Qin rebelling against the imperial edict? Grand concubine Yi's expression changed at these words. She immediately shut her mouth and stood unmoving in place. Cold, Emperor Tianhui looked at her and asked, Grand concubine Yi, tell me, is the Duke of Qin rebelling? No. The Duke of Qin would never dare. Your Majesty is a wise judge. Grand concubine Yi immediately fell to her knees. She'd never kowtowed to anyone since the late emperor's death, but she was very clear in her heart that seniority meant nothing in the face of imperial power. Imperial power was the heavens, the earth, and everything else. Seeing Grand concubine Yi kneel, Emperor Tianhui gave a cold snort and left with a flourish of his sleeves. It wasn't until the dead of night that Grand concubine Yi returned to the Duke of Qin's estate dejectedly. Quite a few people had already arrived, either members of the imperial family or high-ranking officials and officials. All of them were waiting for news from Grand concubine Yi. Naturally, the various factions in the court had different reactions to such a thing. Some people hit a person when they were down, while others watched from the sidelines. Still others ran to rescue them. If this was any other situation, the nobles and officials would have rushed to rescue them if they were imprisoned. But the key point was that the one being imprisoned was the Duke of Qin. In Tianning country, Emperor Tianhui was the one who ranked above the Duke of Qin. Who could help him? Seeing Grand concubine Yi's expression, the people who wanted to ask questions all quieted down, their brows knitted. They'd come not only to ask about the situation in the palace, but to verify whether the rumors were true. The Duke of Qin only favored Han Yunshi and believed Han Yunshi's slanderous words. That was why he'd defied the imperial edict and refused the marriage alliance. No one could imagine such a thing. But many of them had heard about the writ of special privileges and were puzzled. Finally, someone couldn't help but ask, esteemed imperial concubine, doesn't the Duke of Qin have the writ of special privileges in his hands? If we still can't find a way in a few days, why don't we ask for the late emperor's writ of special privileges? Hearing this, Grand concubine Yi's gloomy face turned even gloomier. The New Year's Eve banquet, Changping's incident, and the writ of special privileges had spread through the grapevine, but never made it public. Now she wouldn't express her stance in front of the crowd. She hung her head and didn't answer for a long time. In the end, she waved a hand to dismiss the crowd. The crowd was helpless and didn't dare to ask any more questions. They all took their leave. Emperor Tianhui's words still lingered in Grand concubine Yi's ears, making her tremble with fear and unwillingness. Back then, the late emperor had been seriously ill while the Duke of Qin was still young. But if not for the fact that she had no one to back her up and that her family's power couldn't compare to the Empress Dowager's, the throne might not have been Emperor Tianhui's. Revolt. Hee. As she thought, Grand concubine Yi broke into a cold laugh. At this moment, Han Yunshi saw that everyone had left before entering the rooms. She called out, Mu Fei. She had been scared to death as soon as she heard the news. She never expected the Duke of Qin to defy the imperial decree. Her heart burned with impatience as she prepared to enter the palace, but Zhao Mema held her back. Who would she find in the palace? Who would she beg? Would she be able to find anyone? Would she be able to move them? Would the Duke of Qin allow her to do that? She'd only be seeking her own humiliation. Grand concubine Yi finally recovered from her thoughts. She raised her head to look at Han Yunshi before breaking into a cold laugh. Han Yunshi, do you know what imperial decree the Duke of Qin defied? Han Yunshi could guess that it was the marriage alliance. Otherwise, what else could make the Long Fei Yi and Emperor Tianhui clash like this? It's the marriage alliance. Are you happy now? Grand concubine Yi said as she rose to her feet and walked towards Han Yunshi step by step. Cold, she asked, are you satisfied now? Han Yunshi backed up 2 steps. Although she'd guessed it was the marriage alliance, hearing Grand concubine Yi speak with such certainty still made her heart race. Are you satisfied? Grand concubine Yi roared. Zhao Mama, His Highness couldn't have really met with an accident, right? She muttered. Zhao Mama sighed. Defying an edict, that's a capital offense. All these years, His Majesty's been itching to catch His Highness's tail. His Highness has always been cautious, so why did he? Hearing this, Han Yunshi's heart sank to the bottom. She hadn't bewitched Long Fei Yi, but she'd used the writ of special privileges. In other words, she'd harmed Long Fei Yi in the end. Very quickly, 10 days passed. No one could persuade Emperor Tianhui, and there was no news from the Hall of Regrets. All they could do was wait. Grand concubine Yi didn't enter the palace, either. As soon as she saw Han Yunshi, she didn't say a word, but her gaze was so venomous it could kill. Han Yunshi was filled with guilt. She didn't go anywhere, but sat outside Long Fei Yi's quarters for an entire day. Today, Zhao Mama ran over in a fluster. Esteemed Wang Fei, Han Yunshi rejoiced and immediately went to greet her. Zhao Mama, is there any news? Chapter 172. Seeing Zhao Mama's flustered appearance, Han Yunshi assumed there was news from the palace, but Zhao Mama only panted for breath as she shook her head. Han Yunshi grew anxious. Zhao Mama, say something. Zhao Mama was out of breath. Esteemed Wang Fei, Grand Concubine Yi, she wants to write a letter to ask Princess Rongla for help. What? Han Yunshi exclaimed, unable to believe her ears. It's true. The mama from the peony courtyard said, Esteemed Wang Fei, you can't do this, it's too shameful. Zhao Mama was both angry and anxious. Han Yunshi was even more furious. Without a word, she headed for the peony courtyard. Even the servants knew this would be shameful. Was Grand Concubine Yi crazy or stupid to come up with such a plan? As a man, even an ordinary commoner, being forced to marry a wife was an extremely humiliating thing, to say nothing of the lofty Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi had already defied the imperial edict. If Grand Concubine Yi told Princess Rongla about this, wouldn't she be asking for humiliation? If Princess Rongla made the news public, then she wouldn't just lose Long Fei Yi's face, but Tianing countries as well. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if Princess Rongla agreed to stop forcing the marriage, would Long Fei Yi accept her kindness? Would Emperor Tianhui let him go so easily? In the end, the one to be humiliated would be Long Fei Yi. Han Yunshi stormed into the peony courtyard while Grand Concubine Yi was writing a letter in her study. Han Yunshi couldn't care less. As soon as she entered the room, she raged, Mu Fei, don't harm His Highness. Grand Concubine Yi's hand trembled as she drew a long line across the letter, ruining it. Mu Fei, His Highness would never agree to this. It's fine if he was forced to marry, but he's even asking the other party not to marry? What kind of thing is this? Han Yunshi huffed. But Grand Concubine Yi set down her brush and raged, Han Yunshi, what did you just say? Just who harmed Fei Ye? You actually came here to criticize this consort? Just who was it that harmed Fei Ye? As Grand Concubine Yi spoke, she walked out and drew closer to Han Yunshi. Speak. Just who was it that harmed Fei Ye? Han Yunshi finally calmed down. She lowered her eyes and fell silent. Grand Concubine Yi shoved her aside, causing her to stagger back a few steps and almost fall. Han Yunshi, it's all because of you. You shameless woman. If you hadn't shamelessly barged in, none of these things would have happened today. Han Yunshi, do you know that His Majesty will lock him up for the rest of his life? His Majesty is worried that he won't have this opportunity. As soon as Grand Concubine Yi finished speaking, she backed away a few steps until she bumped into the table behind her. She supported herself with one hand while the other furrowed her brows in pain. She wasn't an idiot. Of course she knew that writing a letter to Princess Rongla was the stupidest thing to do, but she had no other way out. She couldn't even see the Duke of Qin right now, so she had no idea what was going on. If Emperor Tianhui really hardened his heart to imprison the Duke of Qin for the rest of his life, then he'd make his next move. The Duke of Qin's power would slowly crumble while the Duke of Qin's estate would gradually lose its status in the imperial clan. She couldn't bear any of this. The previous emperor had already passed away. Besides herself and the Empress Dowager, all of the other concubines were either buried with him or guarding the tomb. Her only support was this son of hers. Seeing the graceful, luxurious, and exquisite Grand Concubine Yi in such a state of despair, Han Yunshi felt an indescribable pain in her heart. Both mother and daughter-in-law fell silent. After a long time, Grand Concubine Yi looked over again and asked calmly, Han Yunshi, if you don't beg Princess Rongla, do you have any other ideas? Han Yunshi dearly wanted to reply, but no words came out when she opened her mouth. Did she have any ideas? In both her past and present life, she'd disdained any sort of birth or family background. She despised using connections to get things done. But right now, she dearly wished she had a noble birth and a strong maternal family to back her up. She'd have a way to get things done. Unfortunately, she didn't. She didn't have anything. Her maternal family still depended on her to prop up the skies. Grand Concubine Yi didn't scold Han Yunshi any further, but turned to tear up the letter with a soft smile before leaving. Han Yunshi walked out in a daze and wandered aimlessly around the courtyard. But at this moment, Steward Xia ran over in a fluster. Esteemed Wang Fei, esteemed Wang Fei. Han Yunshi didn't react at all. Grand Concubine Yi had already said all that. What other good news could there be besides Long Fei Yi's own compromise? With that guy's temper, how could he compromise? Steward Xia hastily ran in front of Han Yunshi. Esteemed Wang Fei, something's happened. Something big. Your servant can't find esteemed imperial concubine, so I can only find you. What's happened? Han Yunshi's spirits rose. But Steward Xia only said, the imperial uncle's second madam went to visit her maternal family during the Lantern Festival and came back infected with the plague. The imperial uncle's family didn't dare to report that they'd quarantined her, but yesterday the third young master fell ill as well. I heard he was infected. Han Yunshi was thoroughly refreshed. After all, the scariest things in ancient times weren't wars, famines, or floods. The scariest things were plagues. Actually, even in modern times, people paled at the mere mention of epidemics. There's an epidemic outside the city. Why haven't I heard of such a big thing? Han Yunshi asked. Esteemed Wang Fei, the imperial uncle's second madam's maternal family lives in Jun City, far from the capital. I heard that there was an epidemic in a small village there before the new year, but it was discovered early enough that it didn't spread. The imperial court has long secretly. Steward Xia didn't continue speaking and only made a kill gesture. Han Yunshi immediately understood. In modern times, people who contracted infectious diseases would be quarantined and even receive free medical care. In ancient times, they would also be quarantined, but it was basically impossible to save them. They would only be burned alive. Moreover, anyone who came into contact with the disease wouldn't be spared, even if they weren't infected. This was the sad part of medicine that was backward, but it was also helpless. Presumably, that village had already been burned to ashes. If the second madam was infected, then it meant that the virus hadn't been completely eradicated and had spread. Steward Xia, how do you know about this? Han Yunshi asked seriously. Esteemed Wang Fei, the third young master is the imperial uncle's only son. He's the empress's nephew. He's already sick, so how can paper cover the fire? Last night, the imperial physicians all went over. As Steward Xia spoke, he took out several packets of medicinal herbs and said in a low voice, Imperial physician Li had someone secretly send these over to boil into a medicinal decoction. Everyone in the estate must take it. Imperial physician Li also repeatedly ordered that the rooms be cleaned and ventilated. If there's nothing important, it's best not to go out. The imperial uncle's estate is also off-limit. Almost every estate had a dedicated imperial physician. Since imperial physician Li had come to inform them, the other imperial physicians must have done the same. In the end, the matter of the plague couldn't be hidden. The plague virus had an incubation period. Everyone's resistance was different, so the time it took for the disease to break out was also different. However, it usually wouldn't last more than 10 days. Since the plague had spread through the imperial uncle's estate, the third young master probably wasn't the only one who was infected. Moreover, the places the second madam and third young master had been to and the people they met were all likely to be infected. One person would spread to 10, 10 would spread to 100. Only the heavens knew how many more people would fall ill in the next few days. If the plague couldn't be contained, the entire imperial capital would be in danger. The imperial physicians must be frantically busy right now. Do you know what kind of disease it is? Han Yunxi asked seriously. Steward Xia was flustered. Imperial physician Li didn't say, but esteemed Wang Fei, since it's a plague, then it's definitely. We should quickly report this to esteemed imperial concubine so that our estate can prepare for it. Han Yunxi examined the medicinal ingredients imperial physician Li had sent over, but couldn't figure out anything. After all, she wasn't very familiar with such matters. Mu Fei's in the rear courtyard. You should go. Han Yunxi didn't think too much of it. She was still immersed in the matter of Long Fei Yi. To her, that was the most important matter. After some hesitation, she told Steward Xia to secretly send a message to the Han estate before heading deeper into the flower gardens. But things went beyond Han Yunxi's expectations. A few days later, news of the Duke Pingbei's estate, Marquis Pingbei's estate, the Prime Minister's estate, and a few other prominent aristocratic families, even the palace itself, began to spread. There was no way to keep the news under wraps. Even the commoners were showing signs of the plague. By now, the plague had spread throughout the capital city beyond the imperial physician courtyard's control. Even Jiyu Beiyu had no idea what kind of disease it was. All of Tianning's capital city seemed to be shrouded in a grey haze. Everyone was on tenterhooks, and very few people dared to leave their homes. Because of the plague, the news of the Duke of Qin's house arrest naturally died down. Emperor Tianhui kept a close eye on the three-way battlefield while fretting over the plague in the capital city. Although Long Fei Yi still hadn't relented, Emperor Tianhui had no time to worry about him for now. Currently, Emperor Tianhui was deep in thought in his imperial study when eunuch Shui spoke up before he even arrived. Your Majesty, it's bad. Bad news. Emperor Tianhui glared at the door, only to see eunuch Shui scrambling inside. Before he could lose his temper, eunuch Shui reported, Your Majesty, a court lady in the Empress Dowager's palace fell ill and died. What? Emperor Tianhui was so shocked that he almost jumped to his feet. Then he raged, immediately called Jiyu Beiyu over. Your Majesty, Imperial Physician Jiyu is in the Empress Dowager's palace right now, eunuch Shui reported. Emperor Tianhui prepared to go over immediately, but eunuch Shui stopped him. Your Majesty, you mustn't. Imperial Physician Jiyu is personally burning medicine for the Peace and Wellness Palace to expel the evil spirits. That place isn't clean anymore. If a sick person appeared in a place, it meant that the place was dangerous. But Emperor Tianhui had to pay a visit to his imperial mother's safety. He hurried to the Peace and Wellness Palace while asking, everything was fine, so how did she get sick? After all of the sick people in the palace had dealings with the imperial uncle's estate in the past. They'd long been quarantined. After some hesitation, eunuch Shui said, Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager secretly went to the imperial uncle's estate a few days ago and brought a court lady with her. That's the one who got sick. The imperial uncle's estate was the Empress Dowager's maternal family as well as the Empress Dowager's. The Empress was the Empress Dowager's niece, so the third young master of the imperial uncle's estate had to call her aunt an esteemed Empress Dowager grandaunt. Although she knew the imperial uncle's estate was the last place she should go, the Empress Dowager couldn't bear to see her only son on the verge of death. Hearing this, Emperor Tianhui's temper rose to the skies. He lashed out at Eunuch Shui. Nonsense. This is utter nonsense. By the time Emperor Tianhui arrived at the Peace and Wellness Palace, Jiyu Beiyu seemed to be discussing something with the Empress Dowager. As soon as the emperor entered, Jiyu Beiyu stopped talking, while the Empress Dowager knitted her brows with a troubled expression. Chapter 173. Emperor Tianhui's stomach was full of anger, but he couldn't vent it on the Empress Dowager. Instead, he vented it all on Jiyu Beiyu. Jiyu Beiyu, it's already been days. The imperial physician courtyard still doesn't know what this disease is. What else can Jin count on you to do? Do you not want to be the head imperial physician anymore? At most, Jin will give you 3 more days. If you can't control the epidemic by then, don't blame Jin for being merciless. There was no way to treat most epidemics, but they could at least control the scope of the outbreak. Still, they didn't even know what kind of disease it was, which meant there was no way to prevent or control it. Under these circumstances, they could only resort to inhumane methods to prevent the epidemic from spreading to even more people. That was to isolate and burn all the infected. Of course, the authorities could do the same for the commoners, but it wasn't easy to treat the nobles of the capital equally. For example, the 3rd young master of the imperial uncle's estate was on his last breath. Even now, a few imperial physicians were still trying to save his life. Everyone was equal in the face of human life. Was there any difference between nobles and generals? Unfortunately, this was the cruel reality. Jiyu Beiyu had been frowning all this time. Doctors were benevolent, but they often had to make cruel choices. Jiyu Beiyu had long tried to persuade him that there was no way to treat the disease. The only way was to control it. If they wanted to control it, they had to control everything. Not just the commoners, but the imperial family and nobles as well. They had to burn them all. But Emperor Tianhui refused without a second thought. Which member of the imperial family would be willing to accept such an arrangement? How many of them would rebel with a single order? Leaving aside the others, even the Empress Dowager herself wouldn't agree to the imperial uncle's 3rd young master. But this time, Jiyu Beiyu didn't try to persuade him. He glanced at the Empress Dowager before saying, "Your Majesty, perhaps this official and the imperial physician courtyard really aren't up to the task. This official may be so bold as to recommend someone to you. Could it be that someone can cure it? Who is it?" Emperor Tianhui grew alarmed. Jiyu Beiyu didn't hesitate to get straight to the point. The Duke of Qin's estate, esteemed Wang Fei. Emperor Tianhui gave a start at these words, before he laughed disdainfully. Han Yunxi. What did she know? She is a poison doctor. When did she become a divine doctor? Unexpectedly, Jiyu Beiyu had a serious expression on his face. Your Majesty, this humble subject discovered that something was wrong after examining the corpses. The corpses that died from the disease had been left here for a long time, so there were signs of livor mortis. If this humble subject's guess is correct, this plague is not an ordinary plague, but a poisonous plague. After the death of the palace maid in the Empress Dowager's palace, no one dared to deal with it. Due to the shortage of manpower in the Imperial Institute of Medicine, it took more than 2 hours for Jiyu Beiyu to arrive in person. It was also because of this that Jiyu Beiyu noticed the poisonous livor mortis on the corpse. Otherwise, as long as the patient died of illness, they would have been cremated immediately. Jiyu Beiyu had just told the Empress Dowager about this matter. Emperor Tianhui fell silent after hearing Jiyu Beiyu's explanation. Of course, Jiyu Beiyu knew that Emperor Tianhui dreaded Han Yunxi, but he feigned ignorance and said, based on this humble subject's experience, there's an 80 to 90% chance that this is a poisonous plague. Esteemed Wang Fei's poison skills are superb, so she must have a way to deal with it. That palace maid's corpse is still in the Imperial Institute of Medicine. Should we invite esteemed Wang Fei over to take a look? Emperor Tianhui remained silent. At this moment, the Empress Dowager spoke up. Emperor, there are so many people waiting to be saved. This is an important matter that can't be delayed. Hurry and call Qin Wangfei over. After Princess Changping's death, the Empress had gone mad, and the Empress Dowager hated Han Yunxi to the core. But just then, Jiyu Beiyu had said that the third young master of the imperial uncle's estate could only hold out for a day at most. For the sake of the imperial uncle's sole heir, the Empress Dowager had no time to bicker with Han Yunxi. As long as there was a chance, she'd grab it. Emperor Tianhui had just shown his strength to the Duke of Qin's estate, but now he had to ask for help. Naturally, he'd lose face and be unhappy about it. But the Empress Dowager was right. This wasn't a small matter. Of course, Emperor Tianhui was smart enough to reply cold. Jiyu Beiyu, this is a matter for your Imperial Institute of Medicine. Zhen doesn't care who you ask for help, but Zhen wants to control the epidemic immediately. If he had Jiyu Beiyu ask for help in the name of the Imperial Institute of Medicine, Han Yunxi wouldn't be able to show off much. Jiyu Beiyu rejoiced. This official understands. This official will do it right away. Han Yunxi had been depressed for days over the matter of Long Fei Yi. Because of the rampant epidemic, she hadn't left the house at all, but sat outside the gates of Long Fei Yi to think things over. She knew that the epidemic still hadn't been contained, but she never expected it to be a poison epidemic. Frankly speaking, a plague was a highly contagious virus, but a poison epidemic was a contagious disease caused by poisons. Viruses and poisons were different. Viruses caused illnesses, while poisons caused poisons. More accurately speaking, the infected didn't die from illness, but from poison. Naturally occurring poisons that could cause contagious poisons were very rare, while man-made ones weren't easy to make. In other words, the chances of a poison epidemic breaking out were very low. Han Yunxi felt that something was fishy about the situation, but since Jiyu Beiyu had already sent people to ask for help, she didn't think too much of it. She immediately packed up and prepared to leave the house. But before she left, Steward Xia bumped into her. "Esteemed Wangfei, where are you going?" "I'll be right back," Han Yunxi said mildly. She hadn't told anyone that she was going to the Imperial Institute of Medicine. "Esteemed Wangfei, you can't go out. It's a mess outside right now. What if?" Before Steward Xia could finish, Grand Concubine Yi slowly walked over with a cold voice. "Steward Xia, if she wants to die, just let her go. It's best if she doesn't come back." So speaking, Grand Concubine Yi didn't spare Han Yunxi a glance before walking past. Grand Concubine Yi was depressed over the Duke of Qin's affairs and had been like a walking corpse these days. Even Steward Xia felt hurt by her words, to say nothing of Han Yunxi. She didn't say a word, but watched Grand Concubine Yi's figure disappear into the gardens before turning back to smile at Steward Xia. "Steward Xia, help me keep the door open tonight. I'll definitely come back." She hadn't smiled in the past few days. But now she was. Not only was she smiling, but her clear eyes were shining with a moving light as if she'd been reborn. "Han Yunxi, what's wrong with her?" Steward Xia gaped at the sight, while Han Yunxi didn't say anything else. She simply turned and walked out. As soon as Jiyu Beiyu heard that Han Yunxi had arrived at the Imperial Institute of Medicine, he immediately went out to greet her. "Esteemed Wangfei, this official knew you'd come." "You're so sure," Han Yunxi smiled. She immediately explained the general situation of the plague to Jiyu Beiyu. Then the two of them made a few simple precautions before entering the morgue. Han Yunxi admired the doctors of ancient times. They didn't have the advanced precautions of modern times, so even if they knew it was a contagious disease, they were still the first to come into contact with the patients and corpses. As soon as she approached the corpses, the detox system sounded an alarm. Han Yunxi stopped in her tracks, her eyes focused on the corpses. Jiyu Beiyu had seen Han Yunxi check for poisons and treat poisons multiple times, so he was used to her special examination methods. He waited silently on one side. But Han Yunxi came to a conclusion so quickly. Her voice was clear and crisp. "It's poison plague." "Poison plague?" Jiyu Beiyu was alarmed. Of course he knew that the plague was the scariest type of plague. But the symptoms of the infected were completely different from the plague. So what was this poison plague? Was it even more terrifying? "Yes, it's the poison plague." Plague and poison plague spread in the same way in the beginning, through the fleas on rats. Han Yunqi's expression was serious and professional. One could say that Han Yunqi was taking advantage of the situation or was selfish, but when Jiyu Beiyu sent people to the residence to find her, she immediately saw hope of saving Long Fei Yi. This plague had occurred in the capital. If it wasn't contained, it would definitely cause unrest and even affect the country's politics. Moreover, the Emperor and Empress Dowager were probably anxious to save many infected people. Not to mention others, just the third young master of the imperial uncle's estate was the Empress Dowager's precious treasure. The smile in Jiyu Beiyue's eyes deepened. Unfortunately, Han Yunqi didn't notice. Esteemed Princess Consort, could it be that His Highness only just found out the prescription for the poison of the plague? Jiyu Beiyu asked. It's a secret. Han Yunqi was delighted. Imperial Physician Jiyu, bring my words to His Majesty. He'll understand. Long Fei Yi, you used the late Emperor's decree to save me. Then, today, I, Han Yunqi, will threaten the current Emperor for your sake. Han Yunqi finished speaking and sat down on the side. She was going to wait here. She could still contend against Emperor Tianhui with her own hands and skills and rescue Long Fei Yi. Han Yunqi was so happy that she grabbed Jiyu Beiyue's arm. Hurry up, let's go to the imperial uncle's estate. Jiyu Beiyu stared at her slender, delicate hand as a trace of reluctance flitted past his eyes. Still, he gave a light smile and pried her hand free. Esteemed Wang Fei, this way. The carriage's already been prepared. Jiyu Beiyue's movements were so natural that Han Yunqi's heart was open and magnanimous. Although he'd broken free, she didn't think there was anything wrong with holding hands. The two of them didn't feel awkward at all as they strode towards a side door. Jiyu Beiyu mused that it was precisely because she had no distracting thoughts and was magnanimous that she dared to be so unrestrained. Han Yunqi had the formula for the poison plague's antidote, but she didn't have the medicine. Still, her acupuncture skills were enough to save third young master's life for a few days. Moreover, even if she had the antidote, she wouldn't use it until she saw the Long Fei Yi at this critical juncture. The news had already reached the imperial uncle's estate before they'd even reached it. As a result, someone immediately came to greet them the moment they arrived at the entrance and hurriedly led them to third young master's room. Imperial Physician Jiyu, stay behind. Don't let anyone else in. Han Yunqi still stuck to her old rules. Her words angered the old imperial uncle. Han Yunqi, what are you planning to do to third young master? What's so shameful about it? Will you be able to bear the consequences if anything happens to him? Old imperial uncle, I can clearly explain to you what I'm planning to do. However, I'm afraid that once you understand, you'll really need to prepare for your grandson's funeral, Han Yunqi said coldly. You. The old imperial uncle was so angry that he was at a loss for words. Han Yunqi simply crossed her arms and leaned against a nearby pillar, looking like she didn't care. Seeing this, the old imperial uncle panicked. Fine, fine, fine. You can do whatever you want. Hurry and save him. Only then did Han Yunqi straighten her back and enter the room. Before she closed the door, she said seriously, Old imperial uncle, it's a crime to call this Wang Fei by my name. I'll let it go just now, but don't do it again. So speaking, she slammed the door shut, leaving the old imperial uncle standing there gaping. Jiyu Beiyu didn't know what to say about this woman. She really didn't take any losses. She looked so delicate, but she dared to take responsibility for her actions. Forget about the capital, you probably wouldn't find another woman like her in all of Tianing country. Jiyu Beiyu rejoiced in his luck. If not for Mu Qingwu's poisoning, he probably wouldn't have been able to get in here. Actually, Han Yunqi didn't need Jiyu Beiyu to help her. She could handle everything herself, but she seemed to have gotten used to Jiyu Beiyu watching from the sidelines. With a strict attitude, Han Yunqi once again confirmed that it was poison plague before she began to use her needles to expel the poison. The best way to detoxify poison was to find an antidote. Without it, One could only rely on expelling the poison to alleviate the symptoms and delay the onset of the poison to preserve one's life. It had to be said that if Emperor Tianhui had hesitated just a little longer, or if Jiyu Beiyu hadn't discovered the poison plague in time, this third young master would have died without a doubt. Han Yunshi did her best to expel as much poison as possible. After an hour, she withdrew her needles. Done. Jiyu Beiyu promptly handed over a clean handkerchief. Han Yunshi smiled and accepted it. Thanks. As soon as she opened the door, the imperial uncle's entire family surrounded her, all of them talking at once. Although the old imperial uncle didn't speak, he was still nervous. His life is safe for now. He should be able to hold out for 5 or 6 days. If we want to save him, we'll need an antidote, Han Yunshi said seriously. Then where's the antidote? The old imperial uncle couldn't help but ask. But Han Yunshi only replied, then we'll have to wait for His Majesty's news. What did she mean by that? Everyone was puzzled. The imperial uncle was even more surprised and confused. Han Yunshi didn't have time to dawdle here. While everyone was still in a daze, she pushed Jiyu Beiyu aside and left in a hurry. She couldn't wait to see Long Fei Yi. As soon as she entered the palace, Han Yunshi headed straight for the Hall of Regrets. Emperor Tianhui hadn't gone back on his word, but there was nothing he could do about Han Yunshi. The Hall of Regrets was a place where imperial princes shut themselves in to reflect on their mistakes. It wasn't large and had 4 high walls without any windows. There was only a single door, so one could imagine how boring the days inside would be. Eunuch Shui opened the door. Esteemed Wang Fei, please. Han Yunshi had rushed all the way to the palace, but she grew timid as soon as she reached the door. Her heart was racing. How would Long Fei Yi react when he saw her? Esteemed Wang Fei, please, Eunuch Shui repeated. Han Yunshi finally stepped inside and shut the door behind her. The interior of the palace was empty except for a small room. The door was shut tight, and the surroundings were silent. Han Yunshi walked to the door and lightly knocked. Your Highness. But no one answered her. Your Highness, are you inside? Your Highness. Han Yunshi called out a few more times, but there was still no reply. There was no one in sight in the courtyard, so Long Fei Yi could only be inside. Why wasn't he answering her? Had something happened to him? Could it be that Emperor Tianhui had tortured him? Or was he sick and infected with the plague? Thinking up to here, Han Yunshi grew frightened and panicked. Long Fei Yi, she shouted as she shoved the door open, only to find no one inside. Where was he? At the same time, Long Fei Yi was sitting on the roof, his naturally cold lips drawn up into a faint curve. Still, he didn't speak. Long Fei Yi, where are you? Are you here? Han Yunshi walked out of the room, her heart burning with anxiety as she shouted. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that something was off. She almost lost all confidence in herself. Had Emperor Tianhui tricked her? Long Fei Yi couldn't have long. After all, Emperor Tianhui had the right to sentence him to death for the crime of defying an imperial decree. Thinking up to here, Han Yunshi hastened towards the door. But it was at this moment that Long Fei Yi finally spoke up. Han Yunshi, who allowed you to call your lordship by name? Hearing this, Han Yunshi halted her steps and turned to look at the roof, only to see Long Fei Yi sitting high up in the air. Noble, domineering, mysterious, grave, and dignified, he looked like a god high up in the clouds. His deep eyes were currently staring at her. Han Yunshi gave a start before she burst into laughter. Stupidly, she blurted out, Long Fei Yi, you're all right. You scared me to death. This guy, he's actually sitting on the roof. So many people outside are worried about him, but he's so relaxed. What were you afraid of? Long Fei Yi arched a brow as he asked. What was she afraid of? Just then, was she really afraid? Han Yunshi raised her head to look at Long Fei Yi. After a long time, she pursed her lips and teased, I was afraid that if anything happened to you, I'd have to be buried with you. At these words, Long Fei Yi's smile vanished. He landed on the ground and asked cold, how did you get in? It had been so many days, but Mu Fei hadn't come. Presumably, the emperor had issued strict orders. He never expected this woman to get in, which really surprised him. But what surprised him even more was Han Yunxi's reply. I'm here to save you. Long Fei Yi grew curious. Han Yunxi immediately told him about the poison plague. She was so enraptured and full of spirit that she didn't even notice that Long Fei Yi had been staring at her the entire time. Actually, he didn't need her to save him. Emperor Tianhui hadn't thrown him straight into the prisons, but confined him to the palace instead. This was enough to prove that the emperor had left him a way out and had some misgivings. He was the youngest of all the imperial princes and the weakest of them all. Naturally, he had his own skills to be able to survive such a fierce struggle for the throne. Emperor Tianhui couldn't touch him in the past, but now it was even harder. Why did you save your lordship? Long Fei Yi asked again, his amused gaze boring into Han Yunxi's eyes. His gaze was so domineering that it seemed capable of piercing straight into her heart. Han Yunxi immediately avoided it, her heart pounding in her chest. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi suddenly drew closer, his powerful aura enveloping Han Yunxi in an oppressive manner. Because she didn't want to be buried with me? Long Fei Yi thought. If this woman dares to say that again, I'll definitely make her regret it. Chapter 175. Why did she save him? Actually, the reason was very clear. But why did Han Yunxi hesitate in the face of Long Fei Yi's forceful interrogation and domineering gaze? What was she hesitating about? Did she have any other answer? Why? Long Fei Yi pressed closer and closer. Han Yunxi blurted out anxiously, because you used the pardon order to save me. Now that I'm saving you once, we'll be clear. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi said coldly, who wants to be clear with you? Han Yunxi was stunned. She stared at Long Fei Yi with wide eyes. This guy, what did he mean? This time, it was Long Fei Yi who avoided her gaze. He immediately pushed her away, coughed lightly, and said coldly, Han Yunxi, this prince's pardon order isn't that easy to return. You still owe this prince. Stingy guy. Han Yunxi pursed her lips. She couldn't be bothered to be so calculative with him. Since he was done with his questions, it was her turn to ask. Are you under house arrest because you disobeyed the imperial decree and refused to marry Princess Rongla? Han Yunxi felt like an idiot when she asked the question. It was an obvious question, but she still asked it anyway. Yes. Long Fei Yi was very straightforward. Why? Han Yunxi hurriedly asked again. Alright, asking this question also made her feel very stupid, but she still asked it. However, this time, Long Fei Yi was not straightforward. He asked back, does this matter have anything to do with you? For a moment, Han Yunxi was speechless. Actually, this was what she really wanted to ask, but she didn't expect this guy to use it to ask her. Did rejecting Princess Rongla have anything to do with her? Otherwise, if he was forced to marry one, marrying two was also the same. Why was he so stubborn to make such a big deal out of it? Alright, she admitted that when she saw Long Fei Yi's cold face and cold eyes, she couldn't ask. What if she angered this guy? In fact, being forced to marry one woman was already very sullen. There was no need to sullen a second time, right? Han Yunxi thought so and felt much better. It's okay. I was just asking. Long Fei Yi narrowed his eyes and asked coldly, do you have any other questions? No. Han Yunxi didn't look up and missed the displeasure in his eyes. Long Fei Yi did not speak again. Han Yunxi lowered her head. The two of them were always like this. As they talked, they suddenly fell into silence. Of course, Han Yunxi quickly looked up and said, the prescription for the antidote is in my hands. I'll go find His Majesty right now. Even if he doesn't want to, he'll have to release them. Actually, Long Fei Yi had never liked or cared for women's help. But when he saw Han Yunxi so confident, he couldn't help but nod his head. Millimeter, I'll wait for you. Han Yunxi rejoiced and left in a hurry. But as soon as she left, she saw Emperor Tianhui standing alone by the door. When Han Yunxi walked out, Eunuch Shui quickly locked the doors again. Han Yunxi was calm and unruffled, neither servile nor overbearing as she bowed. Is your Majesty waiting for the Duke of Qin's prescription? The Duke of Qin's prescription? This woman was truly sharp-tongued. Emperor Tianhui didn't hide his anger, but it was written all over his face. Coldly, he asked, "Where's the prescription?" Han Yunshi replied unhurriedly, "The prescription is in the Duke of Qin's hands. He said that only he could find the ingredients on it." Emperor Tianhui's hands had long clenched into fists in his wide sleeves. Hearing these words, he couldn't bear it anymore. It was bad enough that this woman threatened him, but she even used Long Fei Yi's name to threaten him. She really knows how to fight for Long Fei Yi's face. But Han Yunshi took things one step further. "I'll have to ask Your Majesty and His Highness Duke of Qin to discuss the prescription. If there's a need, Yunshi will do her best to help you find the ingredients." Wasn't this the same as asking him to go beg Long Fei Yi to come out? Emperor Tianhui was so angry that he almost spat up blood. Killing intent shot out from his eyes. If possible, he'd kill Han Yunshi by 1,000 cuts right now. At the same time, Long Fei Yi was in the courtyard and heard every word clearly. He seemed very satisfied, his lips curled up in a smile the entire time. There was no way Emperor Tianhui would enter the Hall of Regrets, much less discuss the poison plague prescription with Long Fei Yi. With Long Fei Yi's personality, he'd definitely find a chance to strike back and make it impossible for him to back down. Emperor Tianhui glared at Han Yunshi for a long time before speaking cold-voiced to Eunuch Shui. "When the Duke of Qin has had enough remorse, have him come out." So speaking, he flicked his sleeves and left without a backward glance. Eunuch Shui stared at Emperor Tianhui's retreating form in disbelief, unable to recover his senses. "Eunuch Shui, why aren't you opening the door yet?" Han Yunshi reminded him with a smile, in a very good mood. Eunuch Shui glanced at Han Yunshi and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Women really are a source of calamity. The relationship between the Emperor and His Highness Duke of Qin had been growing more and more tense in the past few years. If this woman interfered, heaven knows what would happen in the future. Han Yunshi was very clear in her heart as well. This time, she'd thoroughly provoked Emperor Tianhui. In the future, she'd have to be careful at every step. Actually, she'd avoid offending him if she could. But things weren't in her control, so she'd always been passive. Moreover, choosing Long Fei Yi meant that she was destined to be enemies with Emperor Tianhui, wasn't that so? Long Fei Yi wasn't a fish in a pond. How could he be willing to be controlled by Emperor Tianhui for the rest of his life? As soon as the palace doors opened, Long Fei Yi walked out. Han Yunshi immediately smiled at him, but Long Fei Yi ignored her and strode forward. "This guy." Han Yunshi bit her lip as she glared hatefully at his retreating form. She'd already offended Emperor Tianhui to death. Couldn't he at least give her a smile? But it was at this moment that Long Fei Yi turned around, his tone impatient. "Han Yunshi, you're still not leaving?" "Going where?" Han Yunshi replied unhappily. "Going home," Long Fei Yi replied before leaving without a backward glance. Going home, what a heartwarming word. Did it really come out of that giant ice cube's mouth? Leaving aside Han Yunshi, even Eunuch Shui was left gaping. Only then did he realize that His Highness Duke of Qin and Qin Wangfei were one family. Han Yunshi couldn't help but secretly curve her lips as she eagerly followed after him. By the time they reached the Duke of Qin's estate, it was already late at night. Grand Concubine Yi had long gone to bed, so the large estate was quiet save for a few lanterns. Fortunately, Steward Xia was very obedient and left the door open for Han Yunshi to wait for her personally. As soon as he saw Han Yunshi, Steward Xia was pleasantly surprised. "Esteemed Wangfei, you've finally come back." But before he could finish, he froze as he saw a familiar figure appear behind esteemed Wangfei. It was none other than His Highness Duke of Qin. Steward Xia gaped, too shocked to speak. Wasn't His Highness Duke of Qin under house arrest in the palace? How could? Long Fei Yi walked past them and headed for the hibiscus courtyard. Han Yunshi chuckled at Steward Xia before giving her thanks and chasing after Long Fei Yi. "Your Highness, wait. Your Highness, wait." Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi was too lazy to pay attention. Instead of stopping, he walked faster and faster. After being imprisoned for so many days, he hadn't been able to see anyone. There were many reports he couldn't receive or send out, so he had to deal with the matters at hand immediately. Long Fei Yi. Han Yunshi panicked and rushed forward to grab his arm. Long Fei Yi finally stopped, his cold eyes looking down at her fiercely. Let go. Han Yunshi felt as if she'd been electrocuted and let go. Come with me for a bit, just for a bit. Something very important? Long Fei Yi asked. Not really, Aya, you'll know when you come. Han Yunshi didn't know how to explain. I don't have time. What important matter could she have? Even if she wanted to find medicine, she didn't need to leave immediately. He couldn't delay the matters at hand any longer. Seeing that he was about to leave, Han Yunshi threw caution to the wind and grabbed his hand again. It's something very important. With that, she dragged him away. Long Fei Yi frowned, looking displeased. This woman was getting bolder and bolder. Just as he was about to push her hand away, he saw her little hand holding his tightly. Long Fei Yi hesitated for a moment, interest flashing in his eyes. He purposely deepened his inner energy to make himself heavier. Han Yunshi had been able to pull Long Fei Yi easily at first, but gradually, it became more and more difficult for her to pull him away. After walking less than 10 steps, she couldn't pull Long Fei Yi any further. Finally, she realized that something was wrong. She frowned and looked over, her little face full of stubbornness and anger. She tugged fiercely and fiercely. It's really something very important. Let's go. It seemed that this was the first time a woman had dared to be so fierce to him. Or perhaps it could be said that this was the first time a woman had been so fierce to him. He wanted to be angry, but he only said coldly, then let go. Han Yunshi immediately released him. Although she'd let go of his arm, Long Fei Yi felt as if she'd let go of his heart as well, leaving him feeling empty and empty. He didn't like this unfamiliar feeling. Lead the way, he said coldly, urging her on instead. Han Yunshi turned to leave, leading Long Fei Yi all the way to Grand Concubine Yi's peony courtyard. Grand Concubine Yi had long fallen asleep, while Gui Mema, who was on night watch, was curled up by the door, dozing off. Han Yunshi ignored Gui Mema and went to knock on the door herself. Bang, bang, bang. Long Fei Yi stood behind her, completely unable to guess what this woman wanted to do. Mu Fei was already asleep, so why was she looking for her? The knocking on the door woke up Gui Mema, who was getting up when Grand Concubine Yi's angry voice came from inside. Gui Mema, what's going on? What are you doing in the middle of the night? But Gui Mema didn't reply. She simply stared at Long Fei Yi with wide eyes and slack jaws, still in a half-rising position. Heavens, the Duke of Qin. The Duke of Qin had actually come back. Very soon, Grand Concubine Yi came out in her outer robes, only to see Han Yunshi blocking the door. She grew furious. Han Yunshi, what are you doing? But Han Yunshi was all smiles as she laughed. Mu Fei, I'm back. I brought His Highness Duke of Qin back, too. So speaking, she stepped aside, allowing Grand Concubine Yi to see Long Fei Yi standing on one side. Grand Concubine Yi immediately muffled her mouth. She didn't even care about her outer robes, because she couldn't believe her eyes. She rushed out and hugged Long Fei Yi. Fei Yi, you. Long Fei Yi finally understood why Han Yunshi had brought him here. He allowed Grand Concubine Yi to examine him up and down, asking him questions here and there. He felt a little helpless, but couldn't refuse. Meanwhile, Han Yunshi sat on one side, secretly amused by Grand Concubine Yi's excitement. She wasn't a scourge, much less a jinx. Although her family had declined and she had no power, influence, or backing, far inferior to Princess Rongla's honor and glory, she still relied on her own abilities to bring Long Fei Yi back. Grand Concubine Yi, I, Han Yunshi, am no worse than Princess Rongla in any way. Chapter 176. Just as Long Fei Yi's patience was about to run out, Grand Concubine Yi finally finished her examination and questioning. Now she knew how Long Fei Yi had left the Hall of Regrets. Han Yunshi looked at Long Fei Yi's cold expression and found it hard to understand. Why was this guy so cold to his own mother? Still, Grand Concubine Yi was used to it. Han Yunshi didn't think much of it. When she saw Grand Concubine Yi walk over, she withdrew her smile and put on a calm and composed face. Grand Concubine Yi looked at her as if she wanted to speak, but stopped herself. After a long time, she said, "It's very late. Go rest with His Highness." Actually, Han Yunshi wasn't here to claim credit, but to prove that she wasn't a jinx. She didn't say much, but nodded and left with Long Fei Yi. But by the time they reached the gates of the courtyard, Grand Concubine Yi said, "Fei Ye, if you don't like Princess Rongla, Mu Fei won't make things difficult for you." Rather than saying these words for Long Fei Yi, it was better to say they were for Han Yunshi. Without a doubt, this was the best reply to Han Yunshi, as well as her greatest affirmation. Long Fei Yi knew that Han Yunshi must have dragged him here because Mu Fei had made things difficult for her in the past. Judging from her words, it probably involved Princess Rongla as well. Long Fei Yi's eyes flashed with surprise, but he didn't reply. He kept walking, but Han Yunshi suddenly felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. She thought that no matter how sincere Grand Concubine Yi was, those words were enough. Han Yunshi didn't look back, but stood there for a while before catching up to Long Fei Yi. Under the moonlight, the two of them seemed to slow down their steps on purpose as they walked in silence. Returning to the hibiscus courtyard, they walked to the fork in the garden. One of them had to turn left, the other turned right. However, this time, Long Fei Yi did not leave immediately. Instead, he stopped and asked, "Han Yunshi, do you know the consequences of angering the emperor?" Of course, she had considered the consequences, but she had no choice. If anything happened to Long Fei Yi, she would be the next one to suffer. She answered timidly, "You were the one who made him angry first." Long Fei Yi didn't expect Han Yunshi to answer like this. He suddenly chuckled. "Go to the Imperial Academy of Medicine tomorrow. The plague can't be delayed." After saying that, he left, leaving Han Yunshi standing there in a daze, her heart beating faster. Did she hear wrongly? This guy actually smiled. It wasn't a sneer, nor was it a sneer. It was a faint, gentle smile. His voice was cold and deep. She didn't expect it to be so pleasant to hear when he laughed. It had a kind of attractive charm and seemed to be quite gentle. Gentle? Han Yunshi couldn't believe it herself at the thought. How could such a cold person have a gentle side? Looking at Long Fei Yi's tall, solitary figure, Han Yunshi suddenly wanted to chase after him and see if he was really smiling. Early next morning, Emperor Tianhui sent eunuch Shui with orders for Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi to hand over the antidote to the plague within 3 days. They had to hand over the antidote, not the prescription. Yesterday, Han Yunshi had told Emperor Tianhui at the Hall of Regrets that there was one ingredient in the prescription that required Long Fei Yi to find. Long Fei Yi assumed that Han Yunshi had said those words on purpose, but it turned out to be true. She really was missing one ingredient. It's called violet mugwort. It's very rare and records say that it takes 30 years to sprout and 30 years to grow leaves. It's also very small, about the size of a palm, but one can make countless portions of the antidote. As Han Yunshi handed over the antidote prescription, she was embarrassed to explain. Long Fei Yi wasn't familiar with medicinal plants at all, but even an idiot would know how rare violet mugwort was from those 230 years. He didn't look at the prescription, but arched an eyebrow at Han Yunshi. "You're so sure that your lordship can find it, within 3 days?" he asked with interest. Heaven knows if Emperor Tianhui would vomit blood and die if he knew the truth. Han Yunshi jabbed her fingers together, embarrassed. But she had no choice. Even if she handed over the prescription, Emperor Tianhui would still ask for the ingredients. After all, the third young master of the imperial uncle's estate hadn't been completely saved. She'd been able to threaten Emperor Tianhui this time not because of her prescription, but because she could cure the plague and save lives. If she couldn't and Emperor Tianhui found out about her weakness, then Long Fei Yi would be in even more trouble. "No matter what, Your Highness has to come out first, right?" Han Yunshi said with a smile. Long Fei Yi didn't speak, but kept looking at her. His heart was filled with helplessness and amusement. He even felt like he had to submit to this woman. She really had the guts to threaten and lie to Emperor Tianhui. "Your Highness, there's no time to lose." As Chunxie sees it, Let's make another trip to Medicine Ghost Valley, Han Yunshi suggested. Medicine Ghost Valley had many wondrous ingredients, so that was the first place Han Yunshi thought of. Even if there weren't any, His Excellency Pill Fiend should know where to find them. Long Fei Yi thought of Medicine Ghost Valley as well. He nodded and prepared to leave when Han Yunshi said, "Your Highness, take Imperial Physician Ji with you." "Why's that?" Long Fei Yi was surprised. There are still a few precious ingredients in the prescription that need to be carefully selected. The Imperial Physician Courtyard doesn't have enough in stock, but Medicine Ghost Valley has planted plenty of them. Imperial Physician Ji is familiar with the ingredients, so it'll be better if he chooses them himself, Han Yunshi replied seriously. Long Fei Yi wasn't very willing. Bringing along another person who didn't know how to use lightness techniques would only add to the trouble. Still, he couldn't refuse this reason. He nodded and ordered the servants to prepare the horses. Very soon, a problem arose. Long Feiye and Jiyu Beiyu rode their horses to a stop by the city gates. One was dressed in black robes, the other in white robes. One was cold and mysterious, the other gentle and refined. The two of them were simply a sight to behold. Meanwhile, Han Yunshi, she was dressed in casual clothes and rode behind them on horseback, holding tightly to the rope. Her expression was stiff as her body swayed from side to side. It took her great effort to catch up to them. She knew how to ride a horse, but her skills weren't very good. They only had 3 days. From here to Medicine Ghost Valley, it would take at least 1 day to get there on horseback, and 2 days to go back and forth. Time was tight and they couldn't afford to delay. Jiyu Beiyu looked at them with a faint smile on his face. He didn't urge them, and his gaze was extremely gentle. Long Fei Yi, on the other hand, had a cold expression on his face. He curled his lips and suddenly jumped up and landed behind Han Yunshi. The sudden appearance of the person not only scared Han Yunshi, but also scared the horse. The horse suddenly raised its front hooves, and Han Yunshi screamed. She couldn't control herself and fell back into Long Fei Yi's arms. Long Fei Yi was expressionless. He put his feet in the stirrups and took the reins from Han Yunshi's hands. He didn't know how he pulled the reins with his hands, but he magically tamed the frightened horse. Only those who were good at riding would be able to understand the intricacies behind this. Han Yunshi didn't understand. She was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. She didn't even realize that she was in Long Fei Yi's arms. "Let's go," Long Fei Yi said to Jiyu Beiyu indifferently. "Your Highness, please go first." Jiyu Beiyu was neither servile nor overbearing. Long Fei Yi kicked the horse's belly, and the horse galloped out like an arrow. Jiyu Beiyu was impressed by its speed, and he immediately caught up. The horse galloped, and the wind whistled from both sides. At this time, Han Yunshi finally realized her situation. She was completely trapped in someone's arms, and the space on the horse's back was limited. To be exact, her back was completely stuck in someone's arms, and that person's hands were around her waist, pulling the reins, sometimes loosening and sometimes tightening, swaying back and forth. The last time she went to the Medicine Ghost Valley with him, he held her in his arms and hid under his cloak. This time, it seemed to be a step further. This wasn't too good. Han Yunshi's heart was beating wildly, and she couldn't help but carefully raise her head. She inadvertently saw Long Fei Yi's incomparably sexy Adam's apple. With this look, Han Yunshi couldn't move her eyes away. She never knew that a man could have such a perfect Adam's apple. It was so charming. However, at this time, Long Fei Yi lowered his head and looked down. In an instant, a masculine aura hit her in the face, mixed with the faint fragrance of dragon saliva. It had a kind of magic that made people want to pounce on it. Han Yunshi was stunned, and then she panicked. She forgot that she was on the horse's back, and suddenly turned to escape. However, Long Fei Yi held her waist with one hand and coldly ordered, "Sit properly." The horse was so fast. Was this woman looking to die? Why was she struggling? Why was she struggling? Han Yunshi was instantly energized by the fierce voice. She sat properly and lowered her head. "What are you doing?" Long Fei Yi questioned. "Nothing." Han Yunshi answered in a low voice. She had a guilty conscience. If you're not doing anything, then why are you moving? Long Fei Yi asked again. It was an accident. Han Yunxi secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, this guy didn't find out that she was peeping just now. Otherwise, it would be so embarrassing. Long Fei Yi didn't ask any more questions. In his mind, he saw the pair of blurred eyes when he lowered his head. He had seen many love-struck eyes, but he felt that this woman's eyes were different from others. As for what was different, he couldn't tell. He let go of Han Yunxi's waist and continued to pull the reins. With a sudden shake, the horse sped up. Jiyu Beiyu followed behind them and saw everything. Although Long Fei Yi's speed was getting faster and faster, he still followed and didn't fall behind. In the middle of the night, they finally arrived at the Medicine Ghost Valley. Even though it was late at night, the Medicine Ghost Valley was still very lively. His Excellency Pill Fiend's courtyard was completely dark, but the outside of the courtyard was as bright as day. People who came to ask for medicine each brought a lantern. From afar, they looked like a group of fireflies. Han Yunxi and the others came back last time with the poisonous python's innards. This time, they came back empty-handed. The three of them arrived at the entrance of the courtyard. Jiyu Beiyu was a little worried. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Your Highness, the herbs in the Medicine Ghost Valley are not easy to find." Before Long Fei Yi could answer, Han Yunxi was happy. She moved closer to Jiyu Beiyu and whispered in his ear. Last time, she competed with Duanmu Yarrow to find medicine. In the end, she didn't find the medicine ghost hits the wall. The Duanmu siblings took the initiative to admit defeat. As for whether she found the medicine ghost hits the wall, His Excellency Pill Fiend was very curious. He even chased after her to the courtyard to ask. Today, she came with the answer to negotiate with His Excellency Pill Fiend. Jiyu Beiyu didn't expect this and couldn't help but laugh. Sure. Be careful, don't let that old man hear you. If His Excellency Pill Fiend knew that Han Yunxi was laughing at him like this, they probably wouldn't be able to exchange anything. Jiyu Beiyu immediately stopped talking. He and Han Yunxi looked at each other and laughed silently. They had a tacit understanding. Long Fei Yi looked at them from the side. After a long time, he looked away and knocked on the door. Bang, bang, bang. He used a lot of strength. After knocking for a while, no one answered. Long Fei Yi looked down and used more strength. Bang, bang, bang. It attracted the attention of everyone in the courtyard. Finally, the old steward's angry voice could be heard. Who is it? Who dares to knock on the door in the middle of the night? When the door opened, the old steward was about to flip out. However, when he saw the familiar faces of Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, he was immediately scared into silence. It's them again. Last time, after these two left, His Excellency Pill Fiend didn't eat or drink for 3 days because of the medicine ghost hits the wall. After that, he went on a trip and still hadn't returned. Chapter 177. At the sight of the old steward, Han Yunxi welcomed him with a smile. Old steward, I'll have to trouble you to report that Qin Wangfei made a special trip to tell His Excellency Pill Fiend the answer from last time. Ghost hits the wall? The old steward guessed immediately. Han Yunxi nodded mysteriously, but the old steward only looked helpless. Your Highness, esteemed Wangfei, His Excellency Pill Fiend went on a journey a few months ago and still hasn't returned. You came at the wrong time. What? Then where did he go? Han Yunxi asked hastily. The old steward shook his head. This old servant has never been clear on His Excellency Pill Fiend's whereabouts, much less when he'll return. In other words, they couldn't find him. Emperor Tianhui only had 3 days left. How were they supposed to find Violet Wormwood now? They couldn't even find any news about him. Old steward, does the estate have any Violet Wormwood? Han Yunxi was still holding out hope. The old steward was alarmed. You want Violet Wormwood? Do you have it? Han Yunxi grew excited. But the old steward only shook his head. This old servant doesn't know about such a rare and precious ingredient. Esteemed Wangfei, His Excellency Pill Fiend personally takes care of all the precious ingredients in the valley. This old servant is only in charge of the more common ones." Hearing this, even Long Fei Yi's expression turned ugly. "What to do?" "Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei, please go back," the old steward said as he prepared to close the door. Long Fei Yi immediately stopped him. "You're certain you don't know where Jiyu Qi Shore is? Your Highness Duke of Qin, this old servant wouldn't dare lie to you even if I ate a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. If you don't believe me, you can come in and look for him," the old steward explained. But it was then that a familiar voice rose from the side. "Poison lass, what a coincidence." Han Yunshi looked back and saw that the newcomer was none other than the red-robed Evildor, the suave and elegant Jiyu Qishao. "Why are you here?" Han Yunshi was surprised. "I'm here to do some business with your Excellency Pill Fiend." "Hehe, I didn't think we would be so fated to meet each other here." Jiyu walked over with a devastatingly beautiful smile. Poison lass and fate, as if they were very familiar with each other. She rolled her eyes at him in annoyance. Coldly, she said, "His Excellency Pill Fiend isn't here. You came in vain." Unexpectedly, Jiyu did not mind. "I'm here to sell medicine. It's fine as long as the old butler is here." Upon hearing this, the old housekeeper became interested. The Medicine Ghost Valley naturally collected medicinal herbs. Seeing that this red-clothed young man had an extraordinary temperament, he must have some good stuff in his hands. "May I know what medicinal herbs this young master has brought?" the old butler hurriedly asked. "6-leaf clover, basil flower, and one more thing." Jiyu smiled mysteriously and lowered his voice. "Purple wormwood." As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. This guy actually had purple wormwood? What a coincidence. Han Yunshi was about to speak when the old butler became anxious. "Young master, your Excellency Pill Fiend isn't here, so this old servant has full authority to make the decision. Please come inside and we can talk in detail." Then, he grabbed Gu's hand and pulled him inside. However, Han Yunshi also immediately reached out. Just as she was about to grab Jiyu, Long Fei Yi quickly slapped her hand away and personally grabbed Gu's wrist. He pulled him out of the room and broke free from the old butler's grip. Han Yunshi's hand was very painful from the slap. She looked at Long Fei Yi in annoyance and saw that Long Fei Yi's face was gloomy. He wasn't looking at her. Hey, Your Highness Duke of Qin, it's going to hurt." Jiyu loudly protested. Long Fei Yi's expression was as cold as ice. "You have purple wormwood. Let go first. Let's talk things over." Jiyu narrowed his eyes and secretly struggled with all his might. Unfortunately, his strength was no match for Long Fei Yi's. Helpless, he could only nod. "Yes. Price." Long Fei Yi was truly a man of few words. Not worth 1,000 taels of gold. Jiyu was very serious. Long Fei Yi sneered. "Didn't you want to sell it to Pill Fiend? That comes with a condition." Upon hearing Gu's words, the old butler hastily interjected, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, please don't interfere with Medicine Ghost Valley's business. Let go of this young master. Then let's talk outside the valley." After throwing these words at the old butler, Long Fei Yi dragged Jiyu outside. In the face of Long Fei Yi's tyrannical behavior, the old butler was helpless. However, he still relentlessly chased after Jiyu and tried to persuade him. This young master brought a wondrous medicine to Medicine Ghost Valley. Presumably, he has something important to discuss with His Excellency Pill Fiend. "Young master, please consider carefully." "Young master, His Excellency Pill Fiend can help with something, but not everyone can do it. Although His Excellency Pill Fiend isn't here, young master can discuss with this old servant in detail. This old servant will definitely help you find His Excellency Pill Fiend as soon as possible." Long Fei Yi ignored him and dragged Jiyu away quickly. The old butler tried to persuade him, but they actually followed him all the way out of the valley. The old butler still wanted to persuade him, but at this time, Long Fei Yi finally spoke. "This isn't Medicine Ghost Valley's territory. If you interfere with this prince's business, you'll have to bear the consequences." The old butler almost cried. How could he be so tyrannical? This young master, Please say something. Gu's mouth twitched into an embarrassed smile. As long as you agree to my conditions, I'll sell it to anyone. Hee, old butler, why don't you go back first? You. The old butler was furious. This red-robed young master was even more detestable than His Highness Duke of Qin. Jiyu Chisao put on a beautiful face and smiled like a flower. This young master, it's best if you don't come to Medicine Ghost Valley in the future. The old butler was so angry that he flicked his sleeves and left. In his heart, he added Jiyu to the Medicine Ghost Valley's blacklist. Only then did Long Fei Yi release Gu's hand. A trace of bewilderment flashed through his eyes. They were looking for violet wormwood, but Jiyu Chisao wasn't here. How could Jiyu just happen to be here to sell it? How could there be such a coincidence in the world? There seemed to be something fishy going on here. However, when he saw the old butler's serious and angry expression, Long Fei Yi's suspicions were mostly dispelled. Regardless of whether it was a coincidence or something fishy, obtaining the violet wormwood was the most important thing to them. Jiyu, where's the item? Han Yunshi asked anxiously. Poison lass, we haven't even discussed the conditions yet. Why are you in such a hurry? Jiyu smiled. When he looked at Han Yunshi, his long, narrow eyes were filled with deep interest. Poison your head? Who allowed you to call me that? I don't know you that well. Han Yunshi said angrily. The back of her hand hurt from the slap just now. For better or for worse, I saved your life once. Don't be like this, Jiyu said cheerfully. The more they talked, the more they seemed to be flirting with each other. Finally, Long Fei Yi lost his patience and pulled Han Yunshi behind him. What conditions do you want? He asked coldly. I want a medicinal tea tree sapling. Only the Mu clan in Medicine City has it. I was planning to have His Excellency Pill Fiend come with me, but if Your Highness Duke of Qin has the confidence, then this business deal can still be done. Jiyu was finally serious. Medicine City. This was a large, independent city that was one of Cloud Realm Continent's 4 great cities. Besides Medicine City, there was also Medical City, City of Daughters, and Carefree City. The medical academy that Jiyu and Han Yunshi often mentioned was located in Medical City. As for Medicine City, as its name suggested, it was a gathering place for medicinal ingredients. Many of the city's great medicinal families controlled a lot of medicinal ingredients. They were all centuries-old families, and their foundations were much deeper than Pill Fiend Valley's. Long Fei Yi didn't think twice before agreeing. The violet wormwood is in urgent need. Hand it over first. Jiyu hesitated, but didn't make things difficult for him. Fine. I'm sure Your Highness Duke of Qin won't go back on your word. When Jiyu took out the violet wormwood, Han Yunshi and Jiyu Beiyu both gathered around. Although Jiyu didn't seem like he was lying, they still didn't believe him until they saw the thing. Jiyu took out a transparent glass bottle with the violet wormwood growing inside. It was about the size of a child's palm and had 4 purple leaves. Its roots had been washed very clean and soaked in water, making it very fresh. Seeing this, Han Yunshi and Jiyu Beiyu exchanged glances and relaxed. Is this the thing? Long Fei Yi was a layman. Han Yunshi immediately nodded. Although she wasn't as familiar with medicinal ingredients as Jiyu Beiyu, she couldn't be mistaken. Jiyu Beiyu also nodded. Your Highness, this is the violet wormwood. There's no mistaking it. Long Fei Yi took the violet wormwood and tossed it to Han Yunshi. Take it back and deal with the plague yourself. You're going to Medicine City right now? Han Yunshi was puzzled. Jiyu didn't seem to be in a hurry, but Long Fei Yi seemed to be even more anxious. Long Fei Yi didn't explain. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that he was running out of time, he would have gone to Medicine City to look for medicine after running into a wall in Medicine Ghost Valley. Moreover, his planned destination after the new year was Medicine City. If it weren't for the delay caused by the Imperial Edict, he would have been there long ago. Naturally, it would be best if Your Highness Duke of Qin could fulfill your promise immediately. Jiyu was very happy. Seeing Long Fei Yi mount his horse, Han Yunshi didn't hesitate to stop him. Wait a moment. The remaining 2 ingredients shouldn't be too difficult, right? Long Fei asked. They'd brought Jiyu Beiyu along in order to pick 2 premium ingredients, dragon sunflower and sky vanilla. There were plenty of these 2 ingredients in Medicine Ghost Valley, enough for them to pick out the best of the best. The precious medicinal ingredients in Pill Fiend Valley were all personally managed by His Excellency Pill Fiend. Anyone who wanted to obtain them would have to go through His Excellency. However, common medicinal ingredients like dragon sunflower and heavenly vanilla grass were things that the old steward had the authority to decide on. Although they just offended the old steward, if Han Yunshi could handle His Excellency Pill Fiend, she could definitely handle the old steward as well. It's not difficult, Han Yunshi said faintly. Then what's the matter? Long Fei asked again. Han Yunshi hesitated for a moment, then put on an innocent smile. Your Highness, please take me to Medicine City to broaden my horizons. I promise I won't cause any trouble. Who knows, I might even be able to help. Medicine City was such a powerful place. She really wanted to go there. Her detoxification system had a lot of medicinal ingredients recorded, but there weren't many stored. She'd always been missing 1 or 2 ingredients from the previous detoxification attempts. Maybe she could replenish them in Medicine City. Jiyu sat on a tall horse, smiling without saying a word. To the side, a complicated look flashed through Jiyu Beiyue's eyes, but he also didn't say anything. Of course, the decision wasn't up to them, but Long Fei. Seeing that Long Fei wasn't speaking, Han Yunshi hurriedly added, I've already told Imperial Physician Jiyu the prescription. You can rest assured that the matter of the plague will be left to him. The other 2 ingredients aren't rare, so if you can afford the price, the old steward will definitely sell them. She was pushing all the responsibility to Jiyu Beiyu. Still, Han Yunshi's words weren't wrong. With the prescription and violet wormwood in hand, the problem of the plague could be easily solved without much difficulty. However, Long Fei still looked at her without saying a word. Han Yunshi was anxious. Couldn't this guy give her a reaction? Your Highness, perhaps this concubine can bring back some medicinal ingredients that will be useful in the future. Han Yunshi continued to plead. Long Fei's eyes were filled with amusement, but he still didn't say anything. Your Highness, why don't you state your conditions? Han Yunshi was anxious. But she'd hardly spoken when Jiyu Chishao laughed. Poison lass, if he won't take you, I'll. Come here. Chapter 178. With Gu's words, the already silent atmosphere became even more silent. Long Fei was expressionless, but his gaze never left Han Yunshi. And Han Yunshi, after begging for so long, her patience was about to run out. She really wanted to rely on Jiyu immediately. But when she saw Long Fei's deep, serene eyes, she couldn't bring herself to take a step. Instead, she glanced resentfully at Jiyu Chishao. Unexpectedly, with just one glance, Long Fei's gloomy eyes turned even colder. Han Yunshi instantly felt a murderous aura rising. They were only husband and wife in name. Although he did restrain her to abide by his so-called womanly virtues, it was not to the extent of restricting her freedom. Why was he so serious and fierce? All right, she would not get involved with them. It was not like she did not have legs. After they left, she would feel more at ease going alone. Han Yunshi ignored Jiyu Chishao and chuckled. Then I won't go. Your Highness, take care of yourself on the road. Unexpectedly, Long Fei stretched out his hand and said coldly, get on first. Wait until this prince has thought it through, then I will tell you what conditions I want. Han Yunshi was clearly the one who asked him to state his conditions, but at this moment, she suddenly felt like she had been cheated. Could she not go? Before she could think about it, Long Fei grabbed her shoulders and gently lifted her up onto the horse as if he was carrying something. Just like when they first arrived, he tied her up in his arms. However, unlike the previous time, this time, he only held the reins with one hand and the other domineeringly rubbed her waist, as if declaring ownership. He hugged her very tightly. Han Yunshi could feel the warmth and roughness of his large hands through her clothes. In that moment, she felt unwell and did not care about anything else. Jiyu glanced at her and chuckled disdainfully. He rode his horse away. Imperial Physician Gu, I will leave the matter of the plague to you. You don't have to tell the Emperor where we are going. Long Fei Yi left these words, rubbing Han Yunqi's arm, and quickly chased after them. Jiyu Beiyu was like someone who had been abandoned. He stood there alone and watched the horse gallop away. Only when the figure disappeared did he withdraw his gaze. His figure looked lonely, but his face did not show the disappointment of being abandoned. From beginning to end, it was still that gentle, modest, and gentle expression. It was quiet and beautiful, as if nothing in this world could ever break his tranquility. He took out the violet wormwood from the glass bottle and looked at it seriously. He muttered to himself, it was picked not long ago. His familiarity with medicinal herbs far exceeded anyone's imagination. When he first saw the violet mugwort, he was already suspicious. Now, he was even more certain that this violet mugwort had just been plucked from the soil not too long ago. It should not have been more than 2 hours ago. Within a radius of 100 miles, other than the Medicine Ghost Valley, where else could grow purple wormwood? Or perhaps, where else could it be so coincidental that it was growing? Carefully putting the violet mugwort back into the glass bottle, Jiyu Beiyu smiled thoughtfully. He turned back to look at the Medicine Ghost Valley, but he did not turn back. Instead, he mounted his horse and left. In order to concoct the antidote for the poisonous plague, he still needed a large amount of dragon sunflower and heavenly fragrant grass. He needed to select the best quality among them to be the main medicinal ingredient. The violet mugwort was only the catalyst. He left the Medicine Ghost Valley just like that. Probably only he knew where to find so many dragon sunflower and heavenly fragrant grass. After Jiyu Beiyu returned to the imperial capital, he immediately concocted the antidote. Poisonous plagues were different from ordinary illnesses. Ordinary illnesses required a recovery period. Even if there was medicine, it might not be completely cured. Poisonous plagues, on the other hand, could be cured as soon as the antidote arrived. There was no need to drag things out. Within a few days, the poison plague was more or less under control. Of course, Jiyu Beiyu didn't tell Emperor Tianhui where Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had gone. But after this incident, Emperor Tianhui would never let Han Yunqi off so easily. He couldn't get rid of Long Fei Yi for now, but no matter what, he had to find a way to get rid of Han Yunqi first. This woman who dared to challenge his authority. By now, Han Yunqi's group had already reached the gates of Medicine City. The city gates were large enough to rival the gates of the capital city. They were lofty and grand, but also had a simple and unadorned feel to them. On the way, Han Yunqi learned quite a bit about Medicine City. Medicine City occupied a large area, and its soil was perfect for growing medicinal plants. Not only were there large quantities of medicinal plants, but most of them were of the highest quality. Every household in the city bought and sold medicinal plants for a living. Most of the plants were grown by their own families, but some were resold from others. No matter if they were common or rare ingredients, there was a wide variety of them. In other words, Medicine City was Cloud Realm Continent's largest warehouse for medicinal plants. Supposedly, 2/3 of the world's medicinal plants came from this city. The 3 most famous families in Medicine City were the Mu, Wang, and Xie clans. They controlled more than half of the city's medicinal plants. In the center of Medicine City, there was a forest of the highest quality medicinal plants that the 3 families controlled together. Just like how the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice, no matter how good one's medical skills were, it was all for naught if there were no medicinal plants to use. Thus, although Medicine City's reputation and status weren't as high as medical cities, the people here were still inextricably linked to those from Medical City. Han Yunqi walked into Medicine City and smelled the pleasant scent of medicinal plants in the air. She couldn't help but wonder if she could find any information about Lady Tianxin in Medical City. Would she be able to find out more about her in Medicine City? Of course, she didn't want to let Long Fei Yi and Jiyu know too much about her poison skills this time, especially Long Fei Yi, who'd questioned her poison skills multiple times. It was already evening, so they entered an inn to settle down before making plans. Jiyu seemed to be very familiar with the place, because the innkeeper greeted him as soon as he entered. "Seventh young master, long time no see. Give me 3 of the best rooms. I want them quiet," Jiyu said with a chuckle. The innkeeper glanced at Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, then immediately took out 3 keys to the heavenly rooms. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi only took one with an expressionless face. He held Han Yunxi's hand with the other and went upstairs without saying anything. Needless to say, even Han Yunxi didn't react to Long Fei Yi's actions and almost went to take the keys as well. They were husband and wife, so it was only right for them to stay in the same room. However, they'd never stayed together before. Seeing his large hand holding her small one, Han Yunxi obediently followed without saying anything. The innkeeper was puzzled. "Seventh young master, this," Jiyu licked his lips with interest and continued to chuckle. "What's this about? This young master only wants 2 rooms. The one next door is empty. I'm afraid it'll be noisy." "Then do you want an empty room on the other side as well?" the innkeeper hurriedly asked. It would be a waste if he didn't take advantage of this nouveau riche. Unexpectedly, the originally smiling Gu's beautiful face immediately darkened. Without a word, he took the keys and went upstairs, leaving the innkeeper bewildered. By the time Jiyu Chishao went upstairs, Long Fei's room was already shut. Inside the room, Long Fei Yi was brewing tea by himself. Han Yunxi looked at him and then at the small bed, the corners of her mouth twitching. What did Long Fei Yi mean by this? She thought that Long Fei Yi would explain something, but unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi poured a cup of tea for her without saying anything. Since he didn't explain, she naturally didn't ask. Everything could be discussed at night. Long Fei Yi didn't plan to go downstairs to eat. After resting for a while, he called for the waiter to send the food into the room. Unexpectedly, just as the waiter delivered the food, Jiyu followed in. He sat down casually and ordered the waiter, "Add another pair of chopsticks and bowls." Long Fei Yi didn't stop him and asked mildly, "What do you plan to do with the Mu family's herbal tea tree sapling?" Jiyu was very direct and answered with one word, "Steal." Han Yunxi almost spat out the soup in her mouth. Steal the Mu family's treasure? So this guy actually brought them here to be thieves. If Poison Lass has other ideas, I'd be very happy even if you don't steal. Jiyu laughed. Han Yunxi rolled her eyes and continued eating. Long Fei Yi, on the other hand, was calm. Why steal? Is there no other way? That herbal tea tree sapling was stolen by the Mu family a few days ago. It's impossible to sell it, so we can only steal it. Jiyu said matter-of-factly. Do you know where it is? Long Fei Yi asked again. I only know that it's in the Mu family estate. As for where it is, I really don't know. That's why I asked Jiyu Qisho for help. That old man's ability to find medicinal herbs is top-notch. Jiyu smiled. These words were undoubtedly a reminder to Long Fei Yi that things weren't that simple. However, Long Fei Yi didn't have much of a reaction. He only nodded and continued eating. After the meal, Jiyu was very excited. Your Highness Duke of Qin, shall we begin our operation tonight? Long Fei Yi refused. Since it's in the Mu family estate, there must be news about it. Let's split up first. It won't be too late to act after we've gathered enough information. A trace of coldness flashed in Gu's eyes that no one noticed. His smile became even more enchanting and devilish. All right, no problem. That night, Jiyu and Long Fei Yi went their separate ways while Han Yunxi was left behind at the inn. She wasn't the type to sit still. As soon as Long Fei Yi's group left, she went downstairs and asked the shopkeeper for the location of the auction hall before hurrying out the door in high spirits. In any case, stealing medicinal ingredients had nothing to do with her. She was only here to stroll around Medicine City. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi didn't ask around, but sat in a tea house across from the inn drinking tea. As soon as Han Yunxi left, he caught sight of her. Long Fei Yi's eyes flashed with displeasure. She was unfamiliar with this place and it was late at night. This woman was all alone and unarmed, yet she dared to leave the house. He was about to chase after her when Chu Shifeng reminded him, Your Highness, the Wang family's been waiting for you for a long time. You should go. Long Fei Yi stopped and said coldly, You go, Keep a close eye on her. Yes, Chu Shifeng obeyed, then asked, Master, then Gu's matter. Don't worry about it for now, Long Feiyi said before vanishing from sight. By now, Jiyu was already lying on the roof of the Mu estate basking in the moonlight. Next to him sat a young girl in the prime of her youth. Her aura was clean and pure, and her bright, limpid eyes shone even in the dark. This girl was none other than the Mu clan's most favored ninth young miss, Mu Ling-er. She pushed Jiyu. Chi big brother, when are the thieves you mentioned coming? My father's long set up an inescapable net. Just in 1 or 2 days, there's no rush, no rush. Jiyu Chishao lay lazily on the bed, relaxed and at ease. Beneath the moonlight, his beautiful features were even more enchanting. He seemed to think of something and suddenly laughed. Ling-er, that thief isn't an ordinary person. If you like him, you can keep him as your husband. Mu Ling-er looked askance at him and said unhappily, I don't want him. I want Chi big brother. Her face immediately turned red, but Jiyu didn't think much of it. He chuckled and said, It's too late, too late. Your Chi big brother already has someone in my heart. They had even secretly brought a masked man to the medicinal forest to catch these 3 kinds of poisonous snakes. The medicinal forest was jointly managed by the 3 aristocratic families. The herbs planted in the forest were all very rare. Regardless of whether they were to be harvested or cultivated, the 3 families had to discuss it together. No one was allowed to make a decision on their own, nor were they allowed to bring outsiders in. However, the Mu clan's power was at its peak these past few years. The Xie clan was also firmly attached to the Mu clan, while the Wang clan was weak. Even if they were resentful, they could only turn a blind eye. Moreover, the servant hesitated for a long time and stammered the rest of his words. Wang Gong motioned for the servant to come closer and whisper in his ear. Unexpectedly, after hearing the servant's words, Wang Gong's expression changed and he stood up abruptly. What? Is this true? It's absolutely true. The news came from the guards stationed in the forest. The servant was very certain, his face ashen. Long Feiyi saw Wang Gong's agitation and was about to speak when Wang Gong looked over with a heavy expression. Your Highness, things have become troublesome. What do you mean? Long Feiyi asked calmly. They entered the forbidden area of the forest. The forbidden area of the forest? The forbidden area of the forest was a secret that the 3 great clans of Medicine City had jointly guarded for generations. It was also a place where no one was allowed to enter. Wang Gong didn't expect that the Mu clan would dare to bring outsiders in. Now that things had gotten to this point, Wang Gong threw caution to the wind and no longer hid it from Long Feiyi. The Medicine Forest was a very mystical place. Not only could the soil there easily grow many rare and difficult herbs, but there was also a very unique forest in the center of the forest. It was called the Forbidden Area of the forest. Inside the forbidden area, poisonous miasma blocked the way all year round. Therefore, even people from the 3 great clans rarely approached the edge of the forbidden area, let alone the inside. According to the legends passed down by their ancestors, there was a medicinal pond in the forbidden area. No matter what kind of herbs were grown in water there, they would become poisonous. In other words, as long as one could grow herbs in water there, they could create new types of poisonous herbs. As for the new poisonous herbs, who could detoxify them other than the grower himself? The masked man that the Mu clan had hooked up with was definitely not simple. After hearing Wang Gong's explanation, Long Feiyi was also very shocked. This matter could be big or small. After all, medicine could save people, but it was only medicine. Poison, on the other hand, could kill people. It was a terrifying weapon. Just who was that masked man? What did he want to do? Duke of Qin, the forbidden area has poisonous miasma. We can only wait outside, Wang Gong said seriously. Long Feiyi's eyes flickered with a complicated look. Capturing the masked man was a big deal, but figuring out the forbidden area was no small matter either. He had to go inside and see what they were doing. He stood up and murmured to the guards by his side, "Immediately have Chu Shifeng bring the Wang Fei here." Currently, Han Yunxi was excitedly bidding in the auction hall. It hadn't even been 2 hours, but she'd already gotten her hands on many good things. The feeling of shopping was great to begin with, much less competing with others. She blended in with the crowd and was completely immersed in the activity. She was about to raise her hand again when Chu Shifeng blocked her from behind. Han Yunxi turned back and saw Chu Shifeng, who gave her a fright. "You came too. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness was anxious to find you. Don't buy any more, let's go," Chu Shifeng murmured. Han Yunxi grew nervous at the thought of a single room and a single bed. He went back to the inn. "No, esteemed Wang Fei should hurry and leave with me. It's urgent," Chu Shifeng said. After confirming that he wasn't going back to the inn, Han Yunxi wasn't in a rush. Nothing was more important than replenishing the detox system's reserves. "What's the urgent matter?" Han Yunxi raised her hand as she asked. 3,000 taels. A human life is at stake. Esteemed Wang Fei should hurry and leave. Chu Shifeng was anxious. Han Yunxi withdrew her hand in alarm. A human life is at stake. His Highness. It wasn't easy to talk about it here, so Chu Shifeng could only explain. It's not His Highness. In any case, a human life is at stake. The situation is very serious, so you should hurry and leave. Han Yunxi finally relaxed, but her expression was still serious. "I didn't bring much silver, so I won't be able to leave the auction hall. Hurry and pay up, then we'll leave." Chu Shifeng was left speechless. He'd been standing guard here for quite a few hours, but this woman had already lost 50,000 to 60,000 taels. Moreover, it wasn't silver, but gold. This wasn't a small sum. He thought she'd brought money with her and even secretly sighed at how much money she had in her private stash. Who knew? "Hurry, a human life is at stake," Han Yunxi urged. She really hadn't brought any money. She wasn't planning to return to the inn tonight, but bid until daybreak. Then she'd have the auction hall send word to Long Fei Yi and have him pay to get her. Without a choice, Chu Shifeng could only act on his own and use up all of Long Fei Yi's cash and gold banknotes before taking Han Yunxi with him. When Han Yunxi was brought to the entrance of the medicine forest and heard the details, she was given a fright. She never expected things to be so serious. New poisonous plants. In other words, once poisoned, I'll be under someone's control. Her detox system seemed to have met its nemesis. She looked like she was in pain. What's going on? Long Fei Yi pulled her to sit behind a large rock. Han Yunxi only waved her hand and didn't say anything for the time being. It hurts too much. She had just received a sudden alert from the detoxification system. It was so loud that deafening wasn't enough to describe it. Every nerve in her head was hurting. Under normal circumstances, the detoxification system's alert was do. It would only appear when there was poison, but the detoxification system couldn't distinguish the specific poison. Also, the louder the sound, the more severe the poison. That sound was so loud just now. Who knew what was in front of them? Long Fei Yi looked at her, and a trace of worry flashed across his eyes. He asked again, "Are you okay?" Han Yunxi pulled at her ears to ease the pain. She then said in a low voice, "We should be there soon. There's a strong poison, but I don't know what kind of poison it is." Chapter 180. There was a highly toxic poison in front of them. Whether it was the concentration or the quantity, it was extremely large, but the detoxification system couldn't tell what kind of poison it was. There was no doubt that in front of them was the forbidden medicinal pool that Long Fei Yi had mentioned. Long Fei Yi covered his face and personally covered Han Yunxi's face as well. Holding her hand, they quietly dodged between the large rocks and gradually entered the heart of the forest. Soon, they saw a light in front of them. Long Fei Yi held Han Yunxi's hand and hid behind a large rock. Han Yunxi carefully poked her head out to take a look and couldn't help but gasp. She saw that there really was an oval-shaped pool in front of them. The area wasn't large, only the size of 2 wells. There were all kinds of plants growing inside, and large patches of leaves poked out of the water like a lotus pond. Heavens, these were all poisons, newly cultivated poisons. No wonder her detoxification system almost exploded her ears. God knows how long that masked man had been planting poisons here. The pool was surrounded by lanterns, but there was no one in sight. "Where is he?" Han Yunshi whispered. Long Fei Yi's attention was focused on the surrounding forest and didn't answer. He just casually pulled Han Yunshi's head back and pressed it down. Han Yunshi suddenly struggled, but who knew that at this time, a sharp voice suddenly came from the forest. "Who's there? They have a lot of people. Stay here and don't move," Long Fei Yi said in a low voice. He let go of Han Yunshi's head and immediately soared into the air. Soon, there was the sound of weapons clashing in front of them. Han Yunshi was scared witless as she carefully poked her head out to take a look. When she saw the scene in front of her, she was immediately stunned. Heavens! There really were a lot of people. There were a total of 50 black-clothed assassins surrounding Long Fei Yi. 1 against 50? What kind of joke was this? With such a number of people, they could squeeze Long Fei Yi to death. However, Han Yunshi soon discovered that her worries were unnecessary. The black-clothed assassin couldn't get close to Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi, who was at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, had the upper hand in terms of speed. His swordsmanship couldn't be described as flowing clouds or flowing water. It was simply as fast as lightning. His moves couldn't be seen clearly at all. One could only see his sword rise and fall, and several black-clothed assassins fell one after another. Han Yunshi exclaimed in amazement. She was secretly glad that she did not become enemies with this man. Otherwise, she would not be able to sleep peacefully at night. His swordsmanship was simply heaven-defying. After a short while, the side of the medicinal pool was filled with dead and injured people. Out of the 50 black-clothed assassins, only a dozen were left. They retreated one after another, not daring to move forward. At this moment, 2 men walked out of the dark forest. One of them was a skinny old man dressed in green. He had a pointy mouth and monkey cheeks. One look and you could tell that he was a meticulous ghost. The other was tall and proud. He was dressed in black and wore a green mask with fangs on his face. Only his mouth was exposed. His gaze was so fierce that it was enough to make people ignore his terrifying mask and focus only on his eyes. "It's him, the masked man." He looked disdainfully at Long Fei Yi and coldly said, "Useless things. This sovereign will give you one last chance. This sovereign wants to see his face." As soon as his voice fell, the dozen black-clothed assassins surrounded him again. This time, it was different from the previous time. Because this time, Han Yunshi's detoxification system gave off more than 10 alarms. They wanted to use poison. Moreover, the poison used by each black-clothed assassin was different. A few of the poisons were poisonous powders. As long as one breathed in, one would be poisoned. This masked man was too much of a bully. Han Yunshi was burning with anxiety. How could she warn Long Fei Yi? This fellow's swordsmanship was powerful, but he didn't have any immunity to poison. As long as he wasn't careful, he would be poisoned. Han Yunshi was restless. She wanted to stand up a few times. However, Long Fei Yi had long sensed that something was wrong. He held his sword with one hand and his other hand behind his back. He wasn't as relaxed as before. His eyes were filled with vigilance. Suddenly, 5 black-clothed assassins closed in on Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi's sword flashed and 5 lives were lost. He wanted to retreat in an instant. But who knew that these 5 people were actually human sandbags? When the 5 of them fell, the poisonous powder scattered around Long Fei Yi's surroundings. Han Yunshi was about to shout. Fortunately, Long Fei Yi wasn't someone easy to deal with. He immediately held his breath and retreated far away. At the same time, he suddenly raised his sword and swept it fiercely. In an instant, the sword flashed and the remaining black-clothed assassins were all sent flying into the dark forest. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Beautifully done. Han Yunxi couldn't take her eyes off Long Fei Yi. Her heart was beating wildly. She admired Long Fei Yi from the bottom of her heart. The Duke of Qin was indeed the Duke of Qin. He wasn't someone that ordinary people could imagine. The masked man clenched his fist so tightly that it made cracking sounds. He glared angrily at Long Fei Yi and asked loudly, "Who exactly are you? And who are you?" Long Fei Yi retorted. He raised his sword and pointed it at the masked man. "You don't have the ability to know." The masked man also drew his sword and pointed it at Long Fei Yi. But who knew that drawing his sword was just a feint? If it wasn't for the masked man saying to keep her alive, the black-clothed assassins would have drawn their swords and killed her, right? Once again, she was forced to the side of the big rock and gradually had no way to retreat. Suddenly, a black-clothed assassin stretched out his hand and wanted to pull off her mask. Damn it, Long Fei Yi brought her here to help, not to be a burden, and even more not to expose her identity. Wait a minute, she was here to help. Han Yunxi seemed to have suddenly thought of something. She quivered and immediately took the initiative. She suddenly stretched out her hand and fiercely slapped the black-clothed assassin's hand. "Ah!" The black-clothed assassin screamed and looked at Han Yunxi in shock. "What are you looking at?" "He's poisoned." Han Yunxi kicked over and directly kicked the black-clothed assassin down. The black-clothed assassin fainted on the spot and a poisonous needle pierced into the back of his hand. Han Yunxi's heart ached when she saw this. She was too agitated just now and accidentally wasted a lot of poisonous needles. Actually, 2 or 3 needles could have been taken care of. The other black-clothed assassin looked at his companion in disbelief. Taking this opportunity, Han Yunxi waved her small hand and scattered the poisonous pollen. The black-clothed assassin wanted to dodge, but it was already too late. Once the poisonous pollen touched him, his limbs immediately weakened and he fell to the ground. She stepped on the powerless black-clothed assassin and coldly said, "Are you the only ones who know how to use poison? I'll give you your master's poison." Although Madame Li's words had hurt her greatly, she was right. Those who were good at detoxification were the ones who knew how to use poison. How could Han Yunxi always forget that she knew how to use poison? Alright, although using poison went against a doctor's principle, she was going all out tonight. She was here to help Long Fei Yi. After dealing with the 2 black-clothed assassins, Han Yunxi did not dare to delay and rushed towards Long Fei Yi. However, very quickly, a group of black-clothed assassins came and surrounded her. After witnessing Han Yunxi's poison, this group of black-clothed assassins did not dare to underestimate her and all of them took out their long swords. Han Yunxi's face turned pale. At this very moment, she really wished that she could be like the masked man, who was skilled in using concealed weapons and could kill with a wave of his hand. She knew how to use poison, and she knew all kinds of poisons. However, the way she used poison was completely child's play. Other than injecting needles and spraying poison, she did not know how to do anything else. Under the illumination of the lights, the blades of the swords shone so brightly that it almost blinded Han Yunxi's eyes. Very quickly, a long sword was placed on her neck from behind. Han Yunxi wanted to cry. In the end, she was still a burden. However, who knew that at this moment, several sharp swords would suddenly attack from the side. The momentum was like a rainbow and could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. Not to mention Han Yunxi, even the surrounding black-clothed assassins were intimidated and momentarily forgot to move. Suddenly, there was a crisp sound and the long sword on Han Yunxi's back was instantly broken by the swords. At the same time, the black-clothed assassins were also hit by the swords. Only Han Yunxi stood at her original position, unharmed. Han Yunxi was in disbelief and subconsciously wanted to look back. She saw Long Fei Yi standing not far from her with a sword in his hand and looking at her. His arm had been hit by 3 poisonous needles. He was poisoned. Because he wanted to protect her, he couldn't dodge the poisonous needles. After being poisoned by the poisonous pollen, one's entire body would become weak very quickly. But why didn't she detect any signs of poisoning on this fellow's body? At this moment, the masked man was also looking at Han Yunxi. The three of them were in a deadlock. Everyone wanted to move but no one moved. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi's legs suddenly went soft and he fell down on one knee. Seeing this, Han Yunxi was even more puzzled. They were not far away and she was completely sure that Long Fei Yi wasn't poisoned. Presumably, the poisonous needles on his arm didn't really pierce into his skin and the poisonous powder didn't directly touch his skin. Although she was shocked, Han Yunxi kept the shock in her heart. She didn't show it and pretended to be anxious as she ran towards Long Fei Yi. However, the masked man said faintly, "Stop right there." Chapter 181. Did she have to stop just because he told her to? Han Yunxi didn't care and continued to move forward. However, the masked man instantly closed in on her and didn't allow her to escape. He pressed down on her shoulder with one hand and ruthlessly tore off her mask with the other. Once he saw Han Yunxi's clean little face, the masked man laughed. "You can smell the poison of the pollen from such a distance." With such great ability, this senior was still wondering who it was. "So it's really you. Let go of me." Han Yunxi struggled and grabbed his arm. The masked man was in an extremely good mood and let her grab him. Since Qin Wangfei has come, then this must be. As the masked man spoke, he turned around to look at Long Fei Yi. However, who knew that at this moment, an ice-cold sword was suddenly pressed against his neck. It's Long Fei Yi. He could actually still stand up. Could it be that he wasn't poisoned? How could it be? The masked man didn't expect this. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi had already seen that Long Fei Yi wasn't poisoned. Her reaction was extremely fast. Taking advantage of the masked man's moment of distraction, she suddenly reached out and tore off his green face-fanged mask. Her body nimbly struggled and in an instant, she retreated far away. Han Yunxi was extremely nervous. However, she saw that under the mask, there was actually a shockingly handsome face. The contours of his facial features were deep as if they were deliberately carved by the heavens. He emitted a wild, arrogant, and insufferably arrogant aura of a king. On the corner of his right eyebrow, there was a blood-red eyebrow nail. Under the cover of his fine bangs, she couldn't see what kind of totem it was. It was mysterious and full of wildness. He didn't need to do anything. Just this face alone was enough to make people tremble in fear. Han Yunxi's heart was already beating wildly. Because of this face, it unconsciously sped up. The masked man didn't care about Long Fei Yi's sword on his shoulder. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Han Yunxi coldly. Han Yunxi tightly grasped the green face-fanged mask. She only felt a murderous aura rise and subconsciously took 2 steps back. Han Yunxi, very good. The masked man's voice was full of threat. He actually ignored the threat behind Long Fei Yi. Although Han Yunxi was timid, she hated this kind of threat. Unwilling to be outdone, she retorted, "If you can't even tell that he's not poisoned, you might as well quit the poison world as soon as possible." The masked man clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. At this time, Long Fei Yi's sharp sword was pressed against his neck as he slowly circled to the front. Just as Long Fei Yi was about to see the masked man's face, a white fog suddenly emerged from the masked man's body. "Be careful of poison," Han Yunxi cried out in alarm. Long Fei Yi immediately dodged and landed beside Han Yunxi to protect her. However, in the blink of an eye, the masked man had already disappeared, leaving behind a large patch of dark red blood on Long Fei Yi's blade. Long Fei Yi had injured him quite badly, but in the end, he still managed to escape. Han Yunxi heaved a huge sigh of relief. That was a close call. If it wasn't for Long Fei Yi's fake poisoning and her quick reaction, she probably would have been a burden tonight. "Do you remember his face?" Long Fei Yi immediately asked. Of course, she would remember such a shocking face. "He has an eyebrow nail at the corner of his right eye. It's blood red, like a totem." Han Yunxi quickly replied. Such a special eyebrow nail must be something very rare. Sure enough, once she said this, Long Fei Yi sneered, "So it's him. Who? Is he from Northern Li?" Han Yunxi was very curious. Northern Li's Kang Wang, Jun Yi Xie. Long Fei Yi said word by word. In the three kingdoms, only Jun Yi Xie was someone he would take seriously. Unexpectedly, it really was him, Jun Yi Xie. Han Yunxi was unfamiliar with this name, but she knew of Northern Li's Kang Wang. Northern Li's Kang Wang, Tianning's Duke of Qin, and Western Ju's Crown Prince Yi. These three titles resounded throughout the three kingdoms of Cloud Realm continent. Everyone knew that the Kang Wang was domineering, the Qin Wang was cold, and Crown Prince Yi was ruthless. Han Yunxi had long met Crown Prince Yi of Western Ju, Duanmu Baiye, who was Princess Rongla's older brother, so she didn't think much of it. However, this Kang Wang, leaving aside his poison skills, had an evil and tyrannical aura about him that left a deep impression on her. Unlike Long Fei Yi and Crown Prince Yi, Northern Li's Kang Wang wasn't a member of the imperial family, but the adopted son of the Northern Li Emperor. However, his status far exceeded that of any other prince. He was a person who could cover the sky with one hand and turn over the rain with a flip of his hand. Although they hadn't caught the culprit, this trip hadn't been in vain. Now that they knew who the culprit was, at least they wouldn't be caught off guard. The truth of the matter of the poisoned traitor had also come to light. Seeing Long Fei Yi's icy gaze, Han Yunxi thought to herself, Long Fei Yi definitely won't let this matter rest so easily. Long Fei Yi wiped away the bloodstains on his sword and sheathed it. He was about to pull out the poison needle from his arm when Han Yunxi hurriedly stopped him. Don't move, I'll do it. She took out a handkerchief and carefully wrapped it around the needle before slowly pulling it out. The poison on the needle was made of poisonous pollen. If one wasn't careful, they'd be poisoned. Han Yunxi discovered the truth as soon as she pulled out the needle. Long Fei Yi's sleeves were covered with leather armor, so the poison needle had only pierced the armor and not him. Feigning poison, you're really smart. Han Yunxi had to praise Long Fei Yi. Actually, if it weren't for the detoxification system, she wouldn't have been able to tell at all. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi suddenly burst into laughter. What are you laughing at? Long Fei Yi asked. Majesty Kang must be racking his brains and still won't understand how I knew that you weren't poisoned. Han Yunxi was laughing, but Long Fei Yi unexpectedly said, he'll still look for you. As soon as he said this, Han Yunxi's laughter stopped abruptly. Majesty Kang's dangerous eyes appeared in the back of her mind, and she immediately felt a chill run down her spine. All right, as the main culprit who tore off his mask, she was indeed very dangerous. Seeing Han Yunxi's deathly pale face, Long Fei Yi asked with interest, scared? Han Yunxi immediately put on a pious expression, her gaze burning as she looked at him with a pitiful look. With your highness here, Chunxie is not afraid of anything. Actually, her pitiful look was just an act. Was she trying to suck up to him? Long Fei Yi, who had always hated women who put on airs and pretended to be pitiful, actually didn't hate it. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't say anything. He avoided her gaze and walked towards the poison pool. All right, Han Yunxi had long been used to this cold-faced fellow who was unmoved by force or persuasion. She resentfully shrugged her shoulders and followed him. In any case, she and Long Fei Yi were in the same boat. If she was kidnapped again, Long Fei Yi wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. This should be considered a type of fearlessness, right? The poison pool wasn't very big, and the water was very shallow, but the pool was filled with poisonous herbs. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi both frowned, their faces full of worry. The one in front of them was the biggest problem. Previously, when they were far away, the warning from the detoxification system was very loud. It could only mean that there was a high concentration of poison here, and it covered a large area. However, Han Yunxi still had to do a detailed scan to analyze the specific situation. Although she didn't know what kind of poison it was, the detoxification system could still differentiate which ones were poisonous and how deep the poison was. The results of this analysis shocked Han Yunxi. There's an unknown poison in the pool water. The toxicity of these plants is still very, very weak. It's not enough to poison people, she said lightly. Although he knew that Han Yunxi's poison skills were very powerful, Long Fei Yi still couldn't help but be curious after hearing what she said. How did you know? I smelled it. My nose is very sensitive to poison. Han Yunxi smiled. Even she herself felt that this reason was extremely ridiculous, but no one could doubt her words. A trace of suspicion flashed past Long Fei Yi's eyes, but he didn't pursue the matter. So, the Sangfroid Majesty still doesn't have any new varieties? I don't think so. These plants are still quite some time away from being fully grown. Han Yunxi was very glad that she had discovered it early. The detoxification system had warned her that the pool water was highly poisonous, and the toxicity of these plants was very low. They were basically still in the early stages of being fully grown. In detail, these plants were all non-poisonous medicinal herbs. When they were planted in the poisonous water, the toxicity and medicinal properties were reacting, and a new type of toxicity was gradually emerging. Although the toxicity of the poisonous water was the same, the medicinal properties of each medicinal herb were different. Therefore, the toxicity of the plants would be different in the end. Although she had discovered it in time, Han Yunxi still couldn't help but shiver when she looked at this pool of hydroponically grown poisonous medicinal herbs. The poisonous medicinal herbs in this pool were all different. If they were fully grown one day, then how many new varieties of poison would there be? In her fear, Han Yunxi plucked a medicinal herb and looked at it thoughtfully. If a new variety fell into the hands of others, that would be a terrifying thing. But what if it fell into her hands? Then the terror would belong to others. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi's quick-witted and crafty eyes gradually lit up. She knew how to deal with this big trouble. As long as it was a poison that had been recorded in her detoxification system, no matter if the detoxification system had the medicinal herbs or not, it would be able to distinguish it and provide the prescription for the antidote. If it wasn't recorded, then there would be no solution. However, she remembered that the detoxification system still had a function that hadn't been fully developed. That was intelligent analysis. Given enough raw materials for poison, the detoxification system could automatically analyze the various attributes of the raw materials and formulate new poisons. One had to know that the pool water in front of her and the medicinal herbs that had yet to mature were all considered as raw materials for poison. Looking at the pool filled with emerald green, Han Yunxi's lips secretly curled into a sneer. These raw materials, she must have them. Although the quantity was a little large, but with the unlimited space of her detoxification system, she could still eat them. It was just that it would consume a lot of her brain power. Han Yunxi secretly glanced at Long Fei Yi, who knew that Long Fei Yi also happened to look over. Is there a way to destroy the poison in the pool water? Long Fei Yi asked seriously. For words immediately appeared in Han Yunxi's mind. What a waste of God's gift. She pondered how to take the pool for herself without arousing Long Fei Yi's suspicions. Who knew that at this moment, a stern voice would ring out, who is so bold to dare trespass into Medicine City's forbidden area? Do you want to become enemies with the entire Medicine City? The guards of the forbidden area had finally arrived. Han Yunxi immediately covered her face and sneered in her heart. The Sangfroid Duke had colluded with the Mu family. Now that the Sangfroid Duke had left, the Mu family naturally wanted to lure the guards over. She quickly covered her face and quickly saw a large group of guards emerge from the surrounding forest. The two people at the front were the skinny old man who had been standing with the Sangfroid Duke earlier. Let's go. Long Fei Yi pulled Han Yunxi and was about to retreat. The poison pool in the forbidden area was shared by the three great clans of Medicine City. It was inconvenient for him to publicly interfere with the matters of the three clans. He also didn't want to publicly become enemies with Medicine City. Right now, he could only leave first. But who knew that as Long Fei Yi grabbed Han Yunxi and was about to escape, countless arrows flew out from all directions. Although the forbidden area was heavily guarded, there shouldn't be so many archers. They were clearly aiming for an expert like Long Fei Yi. Otherwise, why would there be so many archers in the forest? Damn it, this must be the Sangfroid Duke's instigation. Note to the readers, the identity of the black-clothed men has been revealed. To see the Sangfroid Duke Jun Yixie's illustration, please follow Jin Mo's public WeChat account, Giamomo 2015. Reply Sangfroid Duke and you will see it. Chapter 182. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Streaks of sharp arrows flew over from all directions like a torrential rain. Long Fei Yi hugged Han Yunxi tightly in his arms as his figure dodged the rain of arrows like a shadow. It wasn't easy to escape in such a short period of time, but it wasn't that easy to injure Long Fei Yi with just the encirclement of sharp arrows. If it was in the past, Han Yunxi would definitely be afraid, but after witnessing this fellow's valiance, Han Yunxi had long relaxed her heart. She carefully poked her head out from Long Fei Yi's arms and sneakily looked at the poison pool below. Very quickly, she concentrated and entered a state of mind. Under a state of high concentration, she could retrieve poison from the detoxification system. Similarly, she could also store poison into the detoxification system. Just that storing it required more effort than retrieving it. Once Han Yunxi entered a state of mind, she gradually forgot about the surrounding dangers and allowed Long Fei Yi to dodge and defend against the sharp arrows. She devoted all her attention to the poison pool. In the end, she couldn't even hear what was happening around her. In her eyes, the only thing left in the world was the poison pool below. The rain of arrows gradually became sparse and Long Fei Yi took the opportunity to escape. However, at this moment, a shocked cry came from below. The poison pool has disappeared. It's gone. Long Fei Yi turned sideways to dodge the sharp arrows and looked down. He was shocked to see that the forbidden poison pool, which was originally filled with poisonous herbs, was now empty. Not only that, even the water in the poison pool had disappeared. Below, that lean old man and the rest were all stunned. Long Fei Yi was also extremely shocked. But he only took one look and didn't stay for long before he left. Not knowing how long that bunch of guards were shocked, Long Fei Yi still couldn't believe what he had seen with his own eyes after he left the medicinal herb forest. Did you see the poison pool? As he asked, he was about to let go of Han Yunxi, but who knew that at this moment, he realized that Han Yunxi had fainted in his arms. When did she faint? Fainted from fright. This woman shouldn't be so weak, right? Long Fei Yi was bewildered. Worry flashed through his eyes, and he immediately brought Han Yunxi back to the Wang family. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi didn't wake up from her coma. Wang Gong sought out all the doctors in Medicine City, but no one could diagnose what was wrong with Han Yunxi. There was no illness, pain, or injury, and his pulse was normal. He was just a little tired, but he shouldn't have been unconscious for so many days. As for being poisoned, Long Fei Yi did not believe that this woman would be poisoned and not wake up. In the past few days, the three clans of Alchemy City held several secret meetings to discuss the matter of the forbidden poison pond in the Medicine Forest. Long Fei Yi wasn't mistaken that night. The poisonous herbs and water in the pond had indeed disappeared into thin air. Wang Gong went there personally and saw that the poison pool was empty. Duke of Qin, this matter is truly strange. Wang Gong stroked his beard and sighed. Since the Mu family had colluded with the Sangfroid king, they must have known that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had barged into the forbidden area. Wang Gong didn't expose the fact that the Mu family had colluded with the Sangfroid king to use the poison pond, and the Mu family didn't know about the relationship between Long Fei Yi and Wang Gong. They only said that there were two masked men who had barged in that night. As for their identities, they didn't disclose it. The three clans increased the security of the Medicine Forest. As for the matter of the forbidden pond, they said they would investigate it together. However, they didn't have a single clue. Who knew what they would find in the end? It's good that it disappeared, so this prince won't have to waste the effort to destroy it. The forbidden poison pond was Medicine City's most precious treasure, but Long Fei Yi didn't hold back in front of Wang Gong. Wang Gong knew the gravity of the situation. If the poison pond really fell into the hands of the Sangfroid king, then one day, not to mention the Wang family, even Medicine City might not be safe. Wang Gong nodded in agreement. There's something fishy about this matter. I'm afraid we'll have to send more people and keep a close eye on it to prevent any more unforeseen events, Long Fei Yi said seriously. Wang Gong nodded in understanding. The forbidden poison pond had always been full of mystery. Now that it had disappeared into thin air, who knew when it would appear again? It definitely couldn't be underestimated. Just as they were talking, a servant girl's surprised voice suddenly rang out from inside the room. Your Highness Duke of Qin, Your Highness Duke of Qin, esteemed Wang Fei is awake. She's awake. Long Fei Yi was overjoyed. He immediately stood up and left. He was usually calm and collected, but this time, his surprise was written all over his face. Wang Gong couldn't believe his eyes as he watched that hurried figure leave. In fact, it was already surprising that someone as cold as the Duke of Qin could bring Qin Wang Fei out. In the inner room, Han Yunxi had just opened her eyes. Her head was still dizzy and her limbs were weak. She felt like she was about to collapse. She knew that she had to sleep for a long time, but she didn't know how long she had slept. What was this place? Just as she was about to ask the servant girl beside her, a familiar voice rang out. It was cold and domineering as usual, but there was a trace of pleasant surprise in it that anyone could hear. Han Yunxi, you're finally awake? Unfortunately, the dizzy Han Yunxi didn't hear it. Soon, Long Fei Yi's handsome face that angered both men and gods appeared in front of her. Han Yunxi grinned and smiled with a pale face. Your Highness, we've escaped. Long Fei Yi had just rushed over like an arrow, but when he arrived, he suddenly felt at a loss as he stood by the bed and looked at Han Yunxi. He only faintly replied with an "en" and sat down on the edge of the bed. The servant girl immediately poured warm water and respectfully handed it to Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi casually took it, but after taking it, he didn't know what to do. Your Highness, Wang Fei hasn't had a drop of water for the past few days. She needs to drink some warm water before eating. This servant will go and bring some millet porridge over. The servant girl hurriedly retreated as she spoke. Feed her water, Long Fei didn't reply, but he quickly helped Han Yunxi up so that she was leaning against his arm. Then he held the water to her lips. His movements were very unfamiliar, as if it was his first time serving a patient like this. However, his arms were very strong and steady. Han Yunxi was still dizzy. After sleeping for so many days, she was thirsty and hungry. When she saw the warm water, her heart burned with anxiety. She immediately gulped it down, but after a few mouthfuls, she choked. Phut, cough cough. With this choking and spitting, she immediately spat out a mouthful of saliva onto Long Fei Yi's hand. Seeing this, Han Yunxi immediately shut her mouth. She was instantly clear-headed. Although her throat hurt so much that she wanted to cough, she still made muffled sounds. Her face was deathly pale. One had to know that the Most Honorable His Highness Duke of Qin had misophonia, and it was a serious case of misophonia. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi put down the cup and hurriedly had Han Yunxi lower her head. He patted Han Yunxi's back and said unhappily, "Cough hard. Why are you holding it in? Do you want to die?" Didn't he dislike it? Han Yunxi couldn't hold it in and coughed heavily. After coughing for a long time, she finally coughed out the water stuck in her throat. Once her breathing was smooth, she had no more strength. She collapsed in Long Fei Yi's arms. She was extremely weak. She looked at Long Fei Yi like a child who had done something wrong. She looked at him timidly and was about to apologize, but Long Fei Yi had her lean against the pillow and went to wash his hands. Han Yunxi swallowed the words of apology that were about to come out of her mouth. She silently looked at Long Fei Yi. She couldn't see his face, only his cold profile. His brows were slightly furrowed, as if he was a little disgusted. He washed for a long time and was very serious. Actually, it was good enough that he didn't push her away on the spot. However, she didn't know why, but looking at Long Fei Yi so focused on washing his hands, Han Yunxi felt an indescribable sense of loss. After wiping his hands clean and looking at his well-maintained hands, a complicated look flitted across Long Fei Yi's eyes. He poured another cup of water and asked Han Yunxi, "Drink some more?" Han Yunxi shook her head. She didn't want to drink for the time being. "Drink some more." As Long Fei Yi spoke, he was about to pass the cup to her, but Han Yunxi instinctively reached out to take it. Both of them paused. Very quickly, Long Fei passed the cup to Han Yunxi and said mildly, "No one's going to snatch it from you. Drink slowly." "Oh." Han Yunxi responded and lowered her head to drink the water. Both of them were silent. After a long time, Han Yunxi spoke up. "Just now. I dirted you. I'm sorry." Long Fei responded with a faint millimeter and didn't say anything else. However, Han Yunxi felt annoyed for no reason. Even she didn't understand why. She had always been decisive, straightforward, and carefree. Why did she always feel like she couldn't let go in front of this man? Was it because she had expectations and thoughts that she shouldn't have? Just then, Long Fei asked, "You were unconscious for 3 days and 3 nights. What happened? Did you faint from fright?" With the change of topic, Han Yunxi felt much more at ease. She looked up and pretended to be shocked. 3 days and 3 nights? What happened? Why did you faint? Long Fei asked again. "I don't know either. I didn't dare to look up when I saw so many sharp arrows. I don't know why, but I felt a little uncomfortable breathing. After that, I don't remember what happened." Han Yunxi was especially serious. In other words, he was hugging her too tightly and she fainted from suffocation. Long Fei stared straight at Han Yunxi. "That's it. Goodness, this guy wasn't so easy to fool." Han Yunxi stuttered. Actually, when this concubine was suffocating, this concubine pushed your highness a few times. But your highness was busy dodging those sharp arrows and didn't notice. Your highness's grip was too strong, so this concubine couldn't break free." There wasn't any other meaning behind her words. She was saying that he was hugging her too tightly. Hearing this, Long Fei's gaze wasn't as wanton as before. Han Yunxi snickered inwardly. Was this considered taking liberties with the Duke of Qin? She wouldn't admit it even if she was beaten to death. She wasn't that daring. She struck while the iron was hot and said, "Your Highness, did this concubine really faint for 3 days and 3 nights? This concubine couldn't have contracted some strange illness, right? What did the doctor say? Rest first. I'll have the doctor come take a look at you later." Long Fei finally withdrew his scrutinizing gaze. "Your Highness, then the matter of the Forbidden Area's poison pool, how should we deal with it?" Han Yunxi probed. Long Fei told her about the strange matter and the 3 great patrician families' arrangements. "It's so strange. How could it be like this?" Han Yunxi was inconceivable. She was very excited, but a trace of craftiness flashed through her eyes. She was probably the only one in the entire world who knew why it was like this. Your pool was strange in the first place. The 3 great patrician families couldn't explain it either. However, it's still a good thing that it's disappeared, Long Fei said indifferently. If the pool water and poisonous herbs hadn't disappeared into thin air, he also wouldn't have known how to deal with them. After all, they were Medicine City's most precious treasures. Destroying them wasn't easy. Han Yunxi nodded her head like she was pounding onions. She had done it without anyone noticing. No matter how capable the 3 great patrician families were, they definitely wouldn't be able to find the poison pool. Moreover, it was impossible for the pool to produce water again. She wondered how His Highness, the Duke of Kang, would react when he found out that the new species he had painstakingly cultivated had been uprooted and pocketed by her. She narrowed her eyes slightly and pretended to rest. In reality, her divine sense had secretly slipped into the detoxification system. Only when she saw that the poison pool water and poisonous herbs were all hidden inside did she relax. Her trip to Medicine City this time really wasn't in vain. She didn't have enough energy to try to activate the detoxification systems program to analyze the poison water and poisonous herbs. However, since it was all in her bag, she wasn't in a hurry. Han Yunxi didn't know how much of a surprise the poison water and poisonous herbs had brought her. Of course, this was a story for another time. After resting for a day, Long Fei and Han Yunxi finally returned to the inn. At this time, Ji Yu had been looking for them until he was almost in despair. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.